Hello and welcome to my video covering the Criterion Challenge. It is an annual challenge put together by Letterboxd user Ben. It consists of 52 categories, for which a user has to pick a movie in the Criterion Collection for each category. The Criterion Collection is one of the most respective groupings of movies there are. If a movie's in the collection, it's most likely great and worth seeing. Not every movie will click with every person, but these do have a stamp of approval on them. I made a list following the challenge last year actually, and I only ended up watching 12 of the 52 movies. Kinda pathetic. So this year, I dedicated myself to completing the challenge. Then, on March 21st, I realized I hadn't watched a single one, so I decided to stop dilly-dallying and get to watching. I also thought it would be fun to tackle this as a giant diary and an exploration of cinema, because that's what the challenge is meant to do, expose you to more types of movies. I'll be going through each movies in order and the categories covering them. Enough admin, let's jump into the wonderful world of Criterions. The very first challenge was to pick a movie from the CC40 box set Criterion offers. It's a set of 40 different movies. One thing Criterion does is open up their closet, where they have physical editions of all their releases. They invite filmmakers who pick and talk about some of their favorites from the collection. This is what we call a closet pick. This set of 40 are some of the most commonly selected movies. I went with In the Mood for Love. I wanted to kick this challenge off tackling one of the legendary movies I had yet to watch. In 2000, In the Mood for Love was released, directed by Wong Kar-wai. This is my second outing of his, and I gave Chungking Express a 4.5, so I'm expecting to like this movie. This movie is about Chow Mo-wen and So Zi-len, who are individually married and rent rooms in neighboring apartments. The two start off as friendly neighbors, but grow closer because of their spouses travel for work and they're absent. As they spend more time together, feelings develop, and they try to suppress them and then justify the feelings. That's what this movie is about, a deep level of longing for another person that really sneaks up on you. The movie is minimal. It's not interested in overstaying its welcome. The story is simple, and that's the magic of it. When I say simple, I am not talking about a lack of depth, but instead the setup is very clear and never wavers. In the Mood for Love isn't interested in telling a crazy story because it doesn't need to. Instead, we get to see the way these two develop feelings for each other. This is one of the realest and rawest love stories I have ever seen in film. There are no big declarations of love. Feelings just start developing one day with no explanation, no over-the-top meet cute. They just realize they enjoyed being in each other's company, that when they are alone, the first person they think of is each other. It creeps up on them. I love this subtlety. The movie presents its thesis when Chow says, "I don't know either. I was only curious to know how it started. Now I know. Feelings can creep up just like that. I thought I was in control." I just find it so relatable. Both romantically and platonically, I have felt this very feeling. I have had friends I care about, but one day, you just realize how special another person could be to you. I don't know when I started to hold any individual as close as I do now, but that's life. Eventually realizing just how important people are. My internal monologue and thoughts is often wrong or doesn't understand how I truly feel. I could see myself in this movie. The characters were lying to themselves. They didn't love each other until they realize they do, and then that massive guilt comes over them. Push it down and try to deny the feelings. The cinematography adds to and elevates this movie. Many shots peek around a corner to get a visual of the characters. It's through a mirror or off to the side. It reminded me of Stolen Looks. Chow and So can't stare at each other because that's weird, but they wanted glimpses of each other, and the movie shows that by putting distance between the subject and the camera, making the individual shots reflect the feelings of the looking at someone you probably shouldn't. The second aspect I love about the cinematography is just how long some of the shots are. They linger, let you sit in the feelings, representing the persistent feelings these two have for each other. You have probably been able to tell by the footage I have put on screen, this movie is beautifully soaked in red. Basic film theory will tell you that red represents passion. The two main emotions I associate with red are love and violence. Both semi-present in this movie, the two characters feel emotional violence through their partners cheating on them. The red heightens those emotions of anguish they feel, while at the same time, it shows the feelings they have for each other before the characters or audience realizes. It is also just so gorgeous. I mean, look at this movie. I can't believe I have gone this whole time without talking about the actors. I've talked about the script and Wong Kar-wai as director, but this movie would have been broken without the leads. First, Tony Liu is very good, emotionally restricted by giving off just enough. Then Maggie Chung. This is the first of 6 movies of hers in this video. I didn't really realize how many I was putting on at the time. If all of her performances are this good, we are in for a treat. She is so good and a fashion icon. They made 46 different dresses for her and it paid off. A couple of highlights: the green one with the white diagonals, the pink one, and the white dress with the black roses. They all looked amazing, as she did, spending hours in makeup and hair every day. The green dress with the purple flowers, the brief use of that red dress. I could go on and on about how great these are, so I must stop. Her face sells so much emotion than I think I am capable of even having. The smallest movements and look mean so much to the character. I am generally opposed to the death penalty, but if you ever cheat on Maggie like your husband did in this movie, you should be punished, and I don't think that's an unjust punishment. I always find wrapping up a movie's individual portion of these videos a little hard. Since the challenge is tied very closely with Letterboxd, I might be giving my star rating at the end of some of these. I give stars pretty loosely and have been slowly finding my scale. They aren't all that serious, but we do start off with a certified 5-star movie. Peak filmmaking. Imagine if we hit 52 for 52 5 stars. The second category was to pick a movie from the year you were born. I went looking for movies from 2003 and found Jim Jarmusch's Coffee and Cigarettes. At the time I made the list, I recently watched and loved my first Jim Jarmusch movie with Ghost Dog: The Way of Samurai. Eager to dive into more of his filmography, I added this one to the list. Coffee and Cigarettes doesn't have an overarching plot, instead relying on theming to tie together the 11 different short stories the movie has. My anthology bag is rather weak. So weak, I find it hard to even remember having watched any. French Dispatch and Kinds of Kindness are the only two that come to mind. Those are two movies from two directors who I don't love, but those particular movies don't stand out as the worst in their filmography, so what can a director I do like do with the concept? The movie itself focuses on 11 different conversations taking place over coffee or cigarettes, and sometimes both. And I just have to say, Coffee was robbed from the lead acting nom in the Oscars this year. Coffee carried this movie emotionally and gave a fire debut performance, but no, the Academy just had to nominate Johnny Depp for the Pirates movie. Disrespectful. No, but this movie is about the conversations happening, how people connect and interact, more so than the coffee. It would be pretty dumb and take too long to talk about every individual section of this, so I'll just mention the high and low points. The opening section, Strange to Meet You, is the OG short film of the same name. It is a little awkward and doesn't fully mesh with the others, but I liked taking work from 15 years prior and expanding on it, so I don't mind its inclusion. I found it cute more than harmful. The worst section is pretty easily Jack shows Meg his Tesla coil. Insert some kind of euphemism here. There isn't actually much conversation, but just Jack spouting out science and philosophy that I don't care about. It was pretty boring and could have been cut. The Wu-Tang Bill Murray section was fun. Now into my top 3. First off, Those Things Kill You. It is the 4th section in the movie and made me start to understand it. I can see these types of tough guys and understand them. Then there is Cousins, in which Cate Blanchett plays herself having a conversation with her cousin, also played by Blanchett. The real Kate is like her movie star persona, down to earth, composed, lovely, and kind. She is gorgeous but not overly cocky about it, while the cousin is the exact opposite. She is rude and confrontational, the type of person who will tell you what is on their mind in a mess. So as an audience member, we see a Cate Blanchett we know interacting with one so foreign to us, but they come together and talk, making for a revealing conversation. The best section of this, to me and seemingly most people, is Cousins with a question mark this time. Alfred Molina and Steve Coogan playing themselves meet in a cafe. This time they talk over tea, probably because they are British. Molina is a big fan of Coughlin's work and proposes a business partnership or friendship based on the finding that these two are distant cousins. Coughlin couldn't be any less interested in the conversation, checked out, failing to recognize anything Molina has been in. He tries to sever all ties, but that changes when Molina gets a call from Spike Jonze, a producer. By that point, the damage was done. Molina was interested in getting to know Coughlin on a professional level and left him behind, not impressed by their interaction. The scene was delightfully awkward throughout. Molina was so good at being this slightly cringy, clingy, desperate guy. I felt like all he wanted was the business connection, but the longer it went on, the more you realize how genuine he is. He's here for human connection over money. So when the power dynamic flips and Coughlin is put on the back foot, it feels fully satisfying. The movie was pretty minimalistic, the camera moving only when it needed, shot in black and white. Not a ton of moving parts here, just giving you the room to take in everything and not overwhelm you. One aspect I find interesting is that they did at most 2 or 3 shots of this movie, and a large chunk of the lines were improvised by the actors, stripping it of the produced feeling that some movies have. This was a little rough around the edges, and natural just like real conversations would be, which worked for the movie. The style played right into the themes, about the value of slowing down and talking to people, how your relationships to others need to be raw and unfiltered. I feel like modern day context made this movie feel even more prevalent than it did at the start of my life. With phones and social media, we are losing the sacred events of sharing a coffee. The face-to-face connection is put on the back burner for calls, but the theory of the movie is that we we need the time and conversations to slow down and see what is in front of us, something I agree with largely. One of my best friends lives nowhere near me. We talk several times a week, but only got physical interaction when we visit each other. That visit felt different to our calls. I'm not saying you should cut off people who don't live near you, that's obviously insane, but instead I feel like I need to find a way to make online long distance interactions feel more like the in-person ones. It's something you have to test and play with. Another reason I was happy to watch this is because Jim Jarmusch has a new movie coming out this year at the time of writing, one that is probably out by the time the video is published, Father, Mother, Sister, Brother, which is also an anthology, although I believe it is only 3 or 4 parts opposed to 11. But this movie made me get on board with the idea of what an anthology was, and what it can do, be more excited for that movie. There are benefits and flaws to the genre. There will always be frustration when you move from a really good part to one you are less interested in. The biggest problem with anthologies is that you will be more invested in one part, but the benefit is that if you aren't vibing with a part, it won't last that long. The cast for this movie is insane. Steve Buscemi, Cate Blanchett, Chose Lee, Vinny Vella, Bill Murray, Alfred Molina. There are so many actors, you cover all the bases, the all-time greats, the underrated ones, character actors, and they all know what they are doing and play their part of the puzzle. And overall, I think everything fits together to make a pretty good movie. And it has had a small impact on me. Following the movie, I noticed myself seeing the little things more, noticing sounds around me I'd never done so before. I was able to observe and take in the mundane in life more. Category number 3 was to pick a movie directed by Robert Altman, a director of an astounding 7 films in the collection. Earlier this year, I had watched his biggest hit, Nashville, and adored it, inducting it into my 5-star library. I also love movies about movies, so I chose to watch The Player. This movie is about Griffin Mills, a Hollywood studio executive that greenlights 12 scripts out of the tens of thousands he gets every year. His job is threatened by a new guy. At the same time, he starts getting mysterious notes, death threats, from who he assumes is an angry screenwriter that he turned down. Mill confronts his suspect, David Kane. The two get into a brawl where Mill kills Kane. So now, he has another person putting pressure on his jobs. The cop knows he was the last person to see David, and he keeps getting the threats and messages from his stalker even after this. When waiting to meet with his stalker, he is approached by 2 screenwriters who pitch a movie that will surely never make money. No big stars and a sad ending in it. All of these things that go against Mills' formula, but he encourages Larry, his rival, to push the film forward so Mills could come later and save the day, with some suggestions to salvage the box office. He goes for a lineup for the crime he committed but isn't identified, so he is a free man. He gets his love story, and makes the movie he pushed Larry to make profitable and lives happily. Like most movies about Hollywood, this is super meta. Comments on and plays with movies in their place in the world. The movie is super bitter towards the system Altman has found himself working in. It is clear he hates how studios boil down creatives to numbers on sheets. Having a good movie isn't enough. You need to check off a list that makes them think you will be profitable. Mills is a seedy, slimy character. He is everything wrong with Hollywood. I have read that when Altman sent the script around, people were lining up to appear in the movie because they saw real Hollywood culture presented in such a raw way. This dude sucks. Clearly takes after some real executives that Altman has encountered. It hits extra hard when someone like Altman makes this teardown. He's the exact type of creative Mills would never touch, but proves what the paper says doesn't always equal profit. Looking at Nashville, for example, the movie made $10 million on a $2 million budget. If he came in and pitched a 3-hour-long movie about how America is both the best and the worst country on earth, about how flawed every human is, he would be laughed out by most execs. There was no way this downer of a movie was going to be a success, but it was, both financially and critically. So he is proof of the foolishness of what people see as the easy profit. He is proof you should hand control over to the creatives, that sometimes the feeling and the heart behind the art makes it all the better. The Player is a satire. You are supposed to laugh at how ridiculous the movie is, and by extension, Hollywood. Like any good satire, this movie is funny. The pitches Mills supports being the dumbest things you have ever heard of. But the biggest example is making fun of itself and working in the opening scene. A big 8-minute one-shot where we go around the studio hearing people talk. They directly call out The Warner like 3 different times, saying all good movies open with tons of cuts, then talking about movies that open with one long shot. These were jokes that wouldn't hit home in most circumstances, but because this movie set itself up as part of the joke, it it works. A laugh out loud movie. I find it so intriguing that Hollywood is able to make fun of itself unlike any other industry I have seen. Nobody makes fun of Hollywood as well as themselves. I could not write something like this. It is kind of why I don't love guys like Conan or Jimmy Kimmel as Oscar hosts. They aren't movie guys. Don't know the ins and outs. I feel like in recent years we have gotten some movies that attempt to do what the player does. Make fun of Hollywood or break the fourth wall of a movie. Recognizing that others can't make fun of you if you do it first. But where the player succeeds is that it's making fun of the system, as I said. It feels like when movies nowadays make jokes, they are directed at the audience, making fun of the viewer, which isn't nearly as satisfying. I just think when a proper writer sits down and sets their mind on a satire, they can hit it out of the park. Then this movie was greenlit and founded. They went through and promoted a movie that called them out, bitterly made fun of them just because it would make them money. Walmart doesn't make fun of themselves. Amazon isn't out here laughing about the exploitation of workers, but Hollywood does. Such an interesting dynamic that shows money takes the precedent over feelings. In essence, the movie executives are court jesters, willing to be the butt of the joke, but only if they benefit from it. This movie also balances 3 different tones, maybe even more, switching between silly comedy, heartfelt romance, and thriller murder mystery. Altman manages to push the pace and never gets bogged down in the details. The transitions between the genres never feel too obvious or stick out because the movie conditions you to it slowly at first and then ramps it up later on. I just found it to be so engaging throughout its runtime and a blast of a movie. I do need to touch on the ending. So after Mill gets the girlfriend of the guy he murdered, kicks Larry out of the studio, and is sitting pretty, he even gets to fire his loser ex-girlfriend who believes in artistic expression. He gets a call from the man identifying himself as the stalker, pitching a movie to Mills. One about a studio executive who murdered a writer and gets away with it, except for the fact that one person has all the evidence they need to lock him up and end his life. Mills, picking up on the signals, agrees to greenlight the movie if and only if the movie ends by the executive living happily ever after and getting to marry the dead guy's girlfriend. The blackmailer names the script The Player. This movie hates happy endings. Several of the more creatively driven characters point out that a movie doesn't need a happy ending, and sometimes when the main character is the bad guy, a sad ending is better. But here, the main bad guy gets his happy ending in multiple universes. He gets to not go to jail and make a movie about how he didn't go to jail. Such a layered mocking of you as an audience member. It knew you wanted Mills to get his comeuppance, so it didn't give it to you. The player and Altman know this is all some dumb game, and that the audience wants in. They want to play along and get involved. You get invested and start to believe what the movie is telling you. A happy ending equals a bad one, only for it to pull the rug out from under you at the last moment. Because not only does this movie criticize the industry, but the audience. It was such a subtle layer that was bubbling for the entire movie that comes out right here. It's a brilliant ending, leaving you to recontextualize the entire movie and question its motives. As you can tell, I really liked The Player. When I originally rated it, I gave it 4 stars and said I was having trouble writing a review, calling it an Ouroboros of a movie that criticized the system it lives in. After actually sitting down and taking a closer look, I would move this up to a 4.5, and I want to revisit it soon. Glad there hasn't been any duds yet. Category 4 is maybe the dumbest in the entire challenge. It is, and I quote, watch a film that would be your first choice in the criterion closet. Now, the entire point of this challenge is to watch new movies and expand your horizons. So if I was going to go into the closet, I would pick movies I have seen. Bram Stoker's Dracula, House, Anora, the Before trilogy, Harakiri. If I didn't already have The Han, I would grab it. I would never just pick up a random movie and hope it hit. So I was a little lost at what to put here. I went with The Young Girls of Rochefort, because I quite enjoyed the other Jacques Demy movie I have seen, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and he's one of the biggest inspirations for Damien Chazelle, one of the GOATs. I just failed to understand this dumbass category and kinda treated it like a free space. This takes place in the small French countryside town Rochefort. Etienne and Bill are in town to set up a fair, while twin sisters Delphine and Solange run a dance studio where one teaches and the other plays piano. The two have dreams of moving to Paris to pursue their passions even further. Their mother Yvonne runs a cute cafe right in the middle of town that is treated as a meeting point for many of the people in the story where they can come together. There is a sailor, Maxence, whose main passion is painting. He paints a picture that looks very similar to Delphine. She wants to find him but is unsure who the artist behind the painting is. A friend of Delphine's, Simon Dame, offers to connect the sister with a composer friend of his while confiding in Delphine that he has returned to Rochefort after many years because that is where he met the woman who had his kid, but they never married and he believes she lives in Mexico. Yvonne has a younger son named Boo Boo. She revealed that she didn't marry his dad, who is Simon. Solange meets a man, but they never exchange contact info and go on. So brief recap. Solange, Delphine, and Yvonne all have some looming feelings for men that the other people in their lives have met, but they're unaware about. The two fair workers get dumped and ask the sisters to help it with the fair in exchange for a ride to Paris. In the end, Solange and Yvonne end up reuniting with their missed lovers and stay in Rochefort, but Delphine does leave for Paris. On the way, they run into Maxence, who painted a picture that looks just like her, but we don't see them connect and figure things out. He just gets in the car with her. Sorry for the lengthy summary section there, I just couldn't find it in myself to not make every plotline clear and show you just how dense and packed this movie is. My main takeaway is just how delightful this is, and how it makes life seem great. How people coming and going is natural and okay. I don't want to lose personal relationships, but this movie made misconnection seem like a flowery part of life. One stop on your long journey. It was about how everything, little moments and interactions, could change your life for the better. How a series of coincidences could lead you to reuniting with the love of your life. Look at Yvonne and Simon. Simon came to the sisters because Andy was back in town and he wanted to give Solange a chance to see him. Then he offered to pick up Boo Boo and give Delphine more time with her mother. This led to Delphine telling Yvonne about Simon. They lived and worked within blocks of each other but never ran into each other until this forced them together. And that is how love and life should be. A stranger in the streets could change your life for the better. This movie is unabashedly pro-love. This one is for the yearners, people who think about the one that got away. It concludes in the happiest way possible, showing that they never necessarily got away, and there is hope that the yearning will lead to something. I talked about how In the Mood for Love represents this slow burn love, the type you aren't even sure when feeling started. The Young Girls of Rochefort is the exact opposite side of that spectrum, love at first sight. It represents the rush of feeling you get for a person. Solange and Andy were ready to drop all their plans to be with each other after a small interaction on the street. Then there is Delphine. She had these feelings for a man she didn't even know purely based on his art and how it spoke to her. These relationships might not go the distance, but that doesn't matter, because the feelings are overwhelming right now. They can't bear the thought of being separate. In love, if you focus too much on the long game, you will miss out on the moment. I find myself relating to this movie's depiction of love even more than I did for most. I find mutual obsession so romantic. I want a partner that I think about all day and look forward to seeing, and the same in reverse. But overall, this movie's strongest and best part is the vibe of it. I want to live in this movie so badly. It makes the time fly by when you are so absorbed and engrossed in the world. And it all starts with the color. I cannot properly express just how happy this level of vibrancy makes me. Adds a magic to the screen, so pleasing to look at. Everything is overly vibrant, setting it apart from real life. These pinks and blues, so easy on the eyes, drew me in. It made even the ugly colors like yellow and green look gorgeous. They just don't make movies like this anymore. This look has largely been lost to time for some reason, but it gives even more diverse color range. Or choose a few colors when there are lots at your fingertips. It will always be my biggest frustration with current movies. It takes place in a gorgeous small town in France. Who wouldn't want to live here? A beautiful view, a walkable city, the cafes. The setting is romantic and I long for this type of living. The costumes are everything to me. Simple pieces mostly made up of one or two colors and nothing else. This movie makes me want to overhaul my wardrobe. I need to go out and buy 12 different colors ties, berets, some white slacks, the shirts, some colorful tops and skirts. You can just match any two of them in a natural piece to make a perfect outfit. Each person looks great and fun. This movie brings me so much happiness and joy. Such a delightful watch. There's a point where Solange wakes up and just plays the trumpet out of the window to give off some cheer. Like, how can I not be obsessed with this movie? The ensemble is great, all giving their varied performances on the characters properly portraying the emotion and happiness. I mean, Gene Kelly's in this and I haven't even brought that up. That screams joyous, infectious time. He does his windmill move. All the dance scene had me grinning from ear to ear and the soundtrack absolutely plays its part. I have it on at a regular rotation at this point. I am 2 movies deep into Jacques Demy's filmography today and ready to call him one of the greatest of all time. I know there are more movies of his out there that I should watch, that I will enjoy, but I haven't been able to bring myself to do it because I know he will never make another one, and I will eventually run out of his movies. I feel the need to portion out the joy that comes from watching a Demi movie. There's no other director I have this thought with, nobody's whose filmography I am saving, feel the need to really appreciate, movies that lift my mood. He is a one-of-a-kind director, able to instill so much joy into everything, a feeling that sticks with me for days, weeks, and months. I watched this movie months before this was shot and finalized, and I still remember it so vividly, every scene and how it made me feel. This movie is a drug. 5 stars, perfect. Category number 5 was to select a movie from a list put out by Criterion about movies with the greatest soundtracks. I went with Michael Mann's Theif because I was somewhat disappointed by Heat and hoped this would make up for that. Spoilers, it didn't. Frank is an ex-con and current criminal. He splits his wife between running his criminal enterprise and his new girlfriend Jessie, who he hopes to build a life and future with. After a bank robbery, Frank's middleman is murdered and the profits are stolen. He confronts the guy who ordered the murder, Leo, and is offered a job stealing some diamonds. He questions if he wants to accept at first, but Jessie assures him that she will love him even if he does. Frank decided one final job for Jessie and the baby they bought off the black market. Frank succeeds in the heist but only gets paid $100,000, significantly less than agreed upon. Leo says he owns Frank now, and Frank will do whatever Leo says. Well, Frank doesn't like that very much, and breaks up with Jessie, blows up their home, his business, hunts down and kills Leo. Alright, enough talking about good movies, time to talk about a hella overrated one, from a director I don't really seem to understand. Let's stir up some discourse. This movie is first and foremost about labor, how the boss will push the workers around and skim any profits off the top, how most people have no choice but to engage in the cycle of endless working. Frank is presented as a blue-collar worker. He does a lot of the prep for his jobs, uses his hands. Then the robbery itself is work. The movie lays out that stealing is labor, makes you relate to Frank through his everyman start and desires. So when you see Leo come in and try to control the labor, it draws direct parallels to real life. Frank has to work in the movies, not because he needs money like most do in real life, but because he will be murdered if he doesn't. Makes the basic exchange between employee and employer more exciting and cooler for the movie. I do agree with this movie's overall take that workers need to take back the power and profits. Laborers need to control labor. But where I differ slightly is the movie's solution seems to be solitary. Frank doesn't need to band together with other workers. In fact, he denies the idea that he would have a union. He has his gun and says that's all he needs. In movies, you are allowed to go shooting. Plot armor and a bulletproof vest will solve all your problems. I just didn't dive with how this movie presented a very real problem, but no real solution. Frank did not take the labor back, he killed the problem. So while I was agreeing with what the problem was, it felt a little disingenuous to not properly solve it. You should band together, organize. Saying your personal gun is your union just perpetuates the cycle for allowing the boss to push the next guy around. Frank was too self-interested for the overall theming this was going for. It makes sense at a base level. He's a criminal who's number one is himself, but that doesn't make him the blue-collar worker that he was portrayed as. The ending undid a lot of what the movie was trying to build. I also think the ideas around labor and capitalism were put on the back burner for a decent chunk of the movie. Theif wants to feel cool, and take the time to make you think that it is. Welding is cool, silent self-brooding is cool, right? Stilted dialogue with no real meaning behind it is supposed to be cool. Michael Mann really wants you to think his characters are cool, and doesn't understand just how unlikable they can be. This movie is the perfect example of that. I have seen people call Frank an anti-hero, but the movie does nothing to paint him as such. He's firmly painted as the hero, an awesome guy who is doing his best. He loves his son, but they don't really give room for the fact that he bought it on the black market. There isn't depth behind Frank as a person. The movie isn't criticizing him for kicking Jessie out and blowing everything up. He only wants to look out for himself, but the movie paints that as good. It created a disconnect for me. They wanted me to cheer on the cool protag, but he was a bad person who didn't understand the complications of capitalism and fucked it up. Trying this hard to come off as cool gives the opposite effects. It looks super lame. You had to dress Frank up with this hyper machismo because he had nothing else to him. There's no reason to root for him. It cycles back to not actually solving the problem, but instead ending it with a big gunfight for effect. The overall pandering to typical male themes is overbearing. Doubles down is obvious because this movie has zero interest in any woman. Jessie is barely a character of her own, only ever being a prop for Frank and his interests. Women seem to be an afterthought in all man movies. We never really see Jessie put her foot down and establish her own interests or character traits. Leaves a bad taste in my mouth overall. Seem to deliberately exclude the one woman shown. This was Michael Mann's feature debut, and he was really good at the directing portion of it. The movie looks great and is soaked in this green lighting. I particularly liked whenever we would see fire, it would break up the green with this dark bright red and looked great. It falls into the trap of under-lighting certain scenes, which really bugs me next to something like The Young Girls of Rochefort, which lights itself and looks better. I understand the mood fits, but come on, it's a little too dark at points. The reason I watched this was the all-time score, and I have to admit it was the best part of the movie. Criterion was right to put this movie in that list. The synth, dreamlike scores underlies the whole movie and builds the vibe on its own. Just like Heat and Ferrari, I thought Theif was fine, although kind of frustrating. It was competently made, but pissed me off, missing its own point and trying too hard to pander to the typical manly interests that come off as desperate. I do want to like a man movie, but none of the three I've watched have put all the pieces together. Category number 6 is the first of a new type of category. Criterion does a series called Adventure in Moviegoing, where they talk with different people in the film world about movies that have affected their lives. These interviews go into a little more detail than the typical closet picks. This first one is with John Turturro, a name I didn't recognize to start off with, but I googled him and instantly recognized him. He's the butler from Mr. Deeds. That was one of my obsession movies when I was like 6. Since I was only familiar with his comedy, I kind of assumed his movies would be a little lighthearted. Nope, this motherfucker has 7 Samurai on his list. I didn't choose to watch it, that was the movie that stopped my challenge last year. I went with Brute Force. It is very funny. The silly guy from Mr. Deeds recommended this movie, a gritty one tearing down the entire world and political system. Brute Force takes place at Westgate Prison, a brutal place ruled over by a warden who is pressured to increase discipline. He instates brutal Chief of Security Captain Moonsey, a harsh ruler that encourages inmates to rat each other out so he can punish more of them. He takes pleasure in torturing people. There's a doctor who warns against this approach. The main inmate we follow is Joe Collins, often defiant against the system, fighting prisoners who play into Moonsey's hand. He gathers a group of people for an escape attempt and to kill Moonsey after a prison goes into extra security and cancels all parole hearing. The escape attempt led to a massive brawl that kills all the prisoners brutally, but they manage to take Moonsey down with them. I have found myself unable to connect with some prison movies, particularly Shawshank Redemption. I find that movies often sugarcoat the actual conditions of prison, how hard and dehumanizing it is. I hate when a prison movie is soft, when it's all flowery and the prisoners just want to go home. Not that they need to escape this hellhole they are locked up in. Brute Force is exactly what its name implies. The movie doesn't shy away from showing you torture, making the desperation of the characters feel all that more justified. The bloody battle at the end and one other stomach-turning scene really display just how horrible these conditions are. Prison is like torture. I mean, it is, literally. A grimy prison movie is a good prison movie in my mind. You can't faithfully show prison without conveying just how bad they can be. I think it is irresponsible to sugarcoat or put baby gloves on when talking about prison. And Brute Force is probably the straightest shooter when it comes to prison movies I have seen. The only rather display of emotional turmoil prison gives you is to watch Daughters, which is a documentary, and brought different emotions to typical fiction film. So naturally, since this displays prison in such a brutal way, it is adamantly anti the system we use. Yeah, I didn't need a movie to tell me that, but it was refreshing for one to come out and state just how unsolvable this problem is without a complete overhaul. The warden and other officials in the prison believed in Moonsey, but the one guy who didn't was the perpetually drunk doctor who had the bleakest mindset. He was forced to turn to the bottle and drown out the feelings, unable to help anymore. He tried his best to bring relief. The only way to help was with the little support he could offer. Currently, it is easy to look at a movie and say it is an allegory for authoritarianism. It's easy for a 70-year-old movie to accidentally mirror our current world, but this movie really earns that comparison. It is about abuse of power and complete power. Moonsey is a dictator who imposes his own will on others and restricts their freedom because he believes he is morally justified. These are criminals. This is their punishment for committing crimes. The control extends past what is needing. He sets up inmates to lie or plant evidence on others in order to get more ammo. He orchestrates violence just for the sake of more control. But at the core, there is a group of people willing to fight the power. Joe would rather go out swinging, trying to make a change and make his life worse than surrender to tyranny. It was inspiring. So this movie works on the micro scale, as a movie about how bad prison is, but then it also goes on to do more and represents how power-hungry people will abuse their power in global politics. There's one scene towards the end of this that holds it back from being an all-timer for me. All the men are sitting and waiting for the breakout and get to talking about what got them in prison. Every single one of them, it was because of a woman he loved just a little bit too much. It got them all in trouble. It has that old-timey, ah shucks, they love women too much. These aren't real criminals if it was for love, right? They're old romantics and it isn't their fault. Put in a little bit of blame on the women they love. It cheapens the brutality of it. Feels like an easy answer to why they're in there. It would be a lot more compelling if they talked about the crimes they did for other reasons. Give some level of depth to the prisoners. They might not be great people. Let the audience come to the conclusion that despite their flaws, this is a horrid way to treat humans. Brutal Force was a decent surprise and has sat with me as I've watched more. It's a good rec from Joe. This was one of the more limited categories. Watch a movie from the 1920s. I have seen 4 different movies from the 20s, so I decided to add one of the all-time greats, The Passion of Joan of Arc. Since it was in the 20s, this is a silent film. It is about Joan of Arc after leading France in a war against the British during the 100 Years' War. She is brought to trial by a judge and people secretly loyal to the British. It is a setup to discredit her, but Joan remains in her belief set that it is a divine mission from God for her to drive the British out of France. The lawyers try to trick her into renouncing her mission, only to succeed succeed when they threaten to burn her alive. She goes back to her confession and is burnt in a public ceremony, but many of the French natives believe she was a saint sent from God. Now look, off the top, I feel the need to point out that I do not hate all silent movies, but I do find most of them to be rather trash. I enjoyed Sherlock Jr., which predated this movie by 4 years, and I adored Robot Dreams, it being one of my top 10 movies of 2023. So where do those movies succeed where this one fails? Simply, those movies don't use dialogue at all. There are no to very few conversations. Joan of Arc, though, takes place largely in a courtroom talking about what is happening, but you can't hear it. Then it cuts to a title card to quickly explain everything, leading to a stop-start feeling. I wish I could hear what the pitch for this movie was. Let's make a movie about talking and emotional monologues given in the courtroom without actually being able to hear them. It's total nonsense. Silent movies have to be able to tell their story without cutting away to a title card every 20 seconds. It divides your movie and makes it feel more like a picture book than a movie. If you have had subtitles on screen, that would have been a little different. I just hate the constant cutaways to title cards. If you can't convey your story without them, go back to the drawing board and find another way. I think in order to have a good and satisfying silent movie, you have to treat the characters as if they can't talk. If they can, the world and characters possesses something the audience doesn't. I'm amazed at just how beloved this movie has come to be, even if it's so ass. I understand where the limitations were filmmaking in 1928. They couldn't just plug in a microphone and pick up the audio, but you have to work with your limitations instead of letting them hamper you. So much of filmmaking is using what you have around you. Ingenuity overcoming problems, which this didn't do. But instead of realizing their boundaries were, and not having audio, they didn't go the other way and hide that negative. They leaned into it with a movie that is so much about talking. Mariah Falconet, who plays the titular Joan of Arc, is pretty impressive with her physical acting, able to make up for the gaps in the filmmaking, making it just bearable enough not to completely drown the movie. Able to convey emotion in a way I haven't seen from many older movies. She was the star of the show. Overall, it was competently made for the time. I don't really think you should criticize a movie from 1928 for its production value, but I wouldn't have much to complain if I did want to do that. Also, the story that was there worked. On paper, it should have been engaging, emotional, thoughtful, provoking movie, but the way of delivery just didn't do justice to the story. Since this is old and movies were relatively new, I don't hate it. It feels a little harsh to look back on a building block of cinema and just talk about how dog shit is. So I want to acknowledge we had to start somewhere. I don't like this movie. I think it's pretty bad overall, but I respect it. Being one of the first experimenting with a new medium can't be easy, and making something that is at least watchable is a good job. But in terms of quality, this movie ain't it. Category number 8 is films that were added as physical media in 2025, celebrating the continued legacy of preserving physical media. I decided to watch my second ever Jean-Luc Godard movie, his take on a Shakespearean classic in King Lear. My first Godard was for a project in my Exploring World Cinema class from college, a class I will bring up later in the project too. It was a group project about Bond Apart, which is one of his earlier movies and I quite enjoyed it. While King Lear exists on the opposite side of his filmography 25 years later in the back parts of his career. Time to see how one of the all-time masters aged. Also, I know very little about the world of Shakespeare. I know about the big ones, and I've read a few in classes over the years, but I don't fully get them. Before this, I was completely unaware of the King Lear story. This is the part where I normally summarize the plot of the movie, except this shit doesn't have one. The Shakespeare story is about a king dividing his possessions between his 3 daughters, but the movie takes place in contemporary Switzerland, where Godard went to school as a child. It doesn't have a king, but instead is vaguely about the making of a movie and how its director's relationship with his daughter unfolds. It is very vague with the plot elements, kinda just a bunch of dreamlike moments scattered throughout, missing any real linear storytelling. All the scattered interactions and scenes almost string together to create a coherent movie. My biggest problem with this is that I just didn't get it. I'm too dumb. The joy from this movie comes from untangling the web it makes, trying to understand what it is saying, playing its game. This is a game that I'm not smart enough to be playing. I just don't know enough about the source material or filmmaker to do it. I have rewatched scenes, read over some reviews trying to explain what they see in the movie, but I just can't find myself understanding it. I keep trying to draw up some conclusion about what's this about and coming up blank. I like myself a vague movie that forces you to fill in the gaps and come to a personal conclusion of what it all means. But there aren't gaps here. It's just one giant canyon that is impossible to cross. The movie doesn't lead me anywhere or give me any hints. Godard was far more concerned with making his vision come to life than making sure others understood it. The movie is self-absorbed, which makes me dislike it. But my opinion in that doesn't matter. He achieved his goal. He doesn't care if I don't like the thing. Much like The Passion of Joan of Arc, I can respect the movie as an artistic achievement. He achieved his vision here. But that doesn't mean it was good as entertainment or a movie to me. At their core, movies are entertainment. Some do far more, but you need both sides. You need the artistic and the entertainment, which I found myself a little checked out of this movie from time to time. Big dense movies where every little part could play an important role are the exact type of movies you shouldn't be checking out of either. It all felt like a film student trying to be mysterious and play off their thoughtless story as meaningful, an underbaked plot that was trying to seem smarter than it actually is. Which again, it could just be that I didn't understand it. The movie would use quotes from modern philosophers, say stuff that sounded vaguely smart, but was actually meaningless. You can't just steal other people's words and assume it means the same thing. This is also barely an adaptation of King Lear, and the fact that it isn't the same story takes none of the cues or lines. At most, it deals with the same big ideas of legacy as the original, but this one is more focused on art and how you pass that down, how you are remembered, taking one scene or a couple lines from the OG. I just don't understand why you would choose to make this a completely different movie rather than making your own thing. If you're going to adapt Shakespeare, do it. Godard is of course a very good director, and there are some scenes that I did enjoy, simply because he knows how to control a camera. Particularly the montage around the middle of the movie, in the editing scene, stood out. I just need more than great cinematography and editing to really like a movie. Maybe someday in the future I'll return to this and find myself not to be so dumb. Maybe not though. Every other category for the next 20 or so is just the decades in chronological order, so I have to watch a movie from 1930. I have a decent history with The Most Dangerous Game. I remember reading the story and being intrigued with the idea in the 7th grade. There was something about the story that inherently engaged me. Then in high school, during my film production classes, I made 2 adaptations of the story over that years. The first chance I got to create a creative video was to go to this story. So I realized I had to watch the original film adaptation for this. A champion game hunter, Bob Rainsford, is on a trip. He gets challenged that he wouldn't want to change places with the animals he hunts. The boat goes down and Bob is the only survivor washing up on a mostly uninhabited island except for eccentric Russian Zaroff, who is a hunting fan himself and knows Bob from his books. Zaroff explains that he grew tired of hunting until he found the most dangerous game. Bob meets Eve on this island and the two grow suspicious of Zaroff, break into his trophy room and find people's heads. Bob refuses to join in on hunting people, so he is forced to play the game. Set loose on the island with only a knife. When a timer goes off, Zaroff will hunt him down. Eve goes with Bob. After thinking he killed Bob, Zaroff returns and Bob wins the game. But Zaroff tries to kill him anyway, leading to a brawl where Bob wins and escapes. The story isn't overly complicated. You can understand the idea present in just the synopsis, really. Bob the hunter becomes the hunted in a high-stakes game of death, a role reversal from all the years of his hunting. Stripped of resources and weapons, he is forced to be the underdog. It shows man's silliness and their pride for game hunting. Killing a big animal is nothing to be proud of if you have centuries of technology behind you that does the killing for you. Brings a new perspective to and challenges Bob's ideas. This movie is dated, of course it would be. A 90-year-old movie is going to be a little rough around the edges, but one thing I really appreciated is that they cut the in-studio sound during the more intense action scenes. It would go from full audio to silent whenever they needed a more dynamic shot. This is you working within your limitations. You don't need the audio during the action just to score, so not using it allowed you to be more dynamic and go bigger in the action parts. The chase scenes, Zaroff stalking the dogs, the big fight at the waterfall were all great action moments. There was no feasible way to record sound at the waterfall during this time, so they cut that part and went for a big setting, which is needed in a survival thriller like this. A blueprint for later movies of this type while using an older style of filmmaking. While it feels dated, I don't think that feeling is overwhelming. I didn't watch most of these movies on the actual channel. They are available elsewhere. For this one, I started watching it on the Internet Archive, the best website there is, but it crashed about 40 minutes in for some reason, so I switched over to Tubi, a streaming service with surprisingly great catalog of movies. But the version there is a crisper, color-restored version. It was fun going from the older version to the newer, cleaner one. I don't think either version is particularly superior to the other. If you want the classic feeling, go to black and white, but if you wanted the visual pop of color, go with the restored. The length of this movie is something. It comes in at only an hour. There is an original cut out there with 15 more minutes of footage that was cut due to excessive gore, which is interesting for 2 reasons. First is that this movie was paced oddly. It spent way longer setting up and building to the reveal than it did out in the jungle, which was the coolest part. Looking back, I can definitely feel a chunk of that missing. And that cut has also never seen the light of day according to all the digging I did. I was surprised that there was some of this movie left on the cutting room floor for gore reason. They don't shy away from showing blood or violence. This was before a lot of restrictions came into play, so they had some free will. Fascinating, someone sat down and said to tone it back. This movie movie has a sister production to another legendary movie. It uses the same sets at the same time as the original King Kong. The Kong crew would film early in the day and leave so the most dangerous crew could come in and shoot at night, even sharing some of the same cast and crew. The two movies are closely intertwined. It is so cool that these two influential movies are tied like this. Most Dangerous Game might not have had the same lasting cultural impact as The Big Monkey, but it is also very integral to the movie industry. Is this the best movie you will ever see? No, it has its flaws of course, but it is a really good one that is fun to look back on with time. And personally, I really liked thinking about my own adaptations I made in school. Category 10 is the closet picks for everyone's fourth favorite Peter Parker, Andrew Garfield. He's a little freak of a guy with these picks. I have seen the red shoes, so that takes the only normal seeming option here out of it. I had a friend in school that had to watch Tampopo and said it was weird. Naked and Brazil both look like weirdo movies, so I went with Happiness. It's always nice to get a little Philip Seymour Hoffman action, but this might have been the weirdest movie of the bunch. Garfield is a little sicko and likes himself some odd cinema. Dear God, I now have to summarize this shit. I'm not even sure how much of this I can share on YouTube. If any section is to get some kind of scolding, it would be this one. Hopefully it is far enough in the video. Trigger warning, this movie deals heavily with sexual assault and pedophilia. There's a lot of cum talk. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I will be talking about how it was presented in the movie. There will be a time code on screen and in the description to jump forward in the video. Happiness is about three sisters in their love lives, and also their parents, I guess. The youngest, Joy, is lost in life and decides to become a teacher even through a strike. She gets into a relationship with one of her students, he robs her and leaves her alone. The middle sister is very successful, but unfulfilled in life with no partner and imposter syndrome. She's enamored with the mystery man who keeps calling and threatening her sexually, but after finding him ugly, she doesn't want a relationship with him anymore. The final sister's life is the worst part of this. She has 3 young kids and a husband. He has raped 2 kids from his son's school. There are some really tough scenes in here where we see him drugging the children and driving him home the morning after. There are other awkward conversations with him and his son about jerking off and penis size as well. Happiness goes to some dark and uncomfortable places. It was a massive reason why I didn't enjoy this movie. I don't enjoy seeing rape threats and pedophilia play out, especially in a way that is trying to make fun of the situation. I'm the type of person to try and laugh out an awkward conversation in real life, but these are topics that go beyond that impulse. They need to be properly addressed and aren't jokes. The tone in this wasn't nearly as serious as the script demanded. The comedy is very hit or miss for me. There are some painfully unfunny jokes, like how the one girl cut off the doorman's dick, something they return to time and time again. Even in the final scene, after the character's gone. This is far from the only example of this either. They repeat unfunny jokes a couple times, leading to me wanting to turn it off. However, there are a few undeniably banger jokes in this, like some of the funniest stuff I've ever heard. One sister says she isn't laughing at her sister but with her, then the other girl pointing out that she isn't laughing. In the beginning scene, Joy is offered the bull thing and gets so happy, and he goes on a monologue about how he planned to give this to the love of his life, and then drops that it isn't Joy because she was a shallow bitch. Both are examples of setting up expectations then hitting the characters with a punch of brutal honesty. This movie was a little hard to track down. The subject matter makes it not readily available. Sundance refused to screen it back in the day, and it remains unavailable on any streaming services. Can't even rent or buy this. Your options are to buy an old DVD or the Criterion release from last year, or just go on YouTube, but in terms of official streaming, nobody wants to touch this. And it seems quite obvious why. This is a deeply weird and uncomfortable movie. If this was just sitting on your streaming service, some poor old person could stumble into it and watch it only to be disgusted. It just makes business sense to not have this on your service, and it doesn't have that huge of a following. The end of this movie is a teenage boy finally achieving his first orgasm. His pedo dad has been coaching him to get throughout the entire movie by staring at a woman in a bikini. They show us the fluids, which a dog licks up, and the boy proudly announces to his entire family that he has finally come. Like, this movie shouldn't be taken seriously. And the fact that I have taken the time to look at this seriously and dissect and talk about it is a joke. And the joke is on me. I think the actors did a great job squeezing comedy out of a script that doesn't have any. Philip Seymour Hoffman is excellent as always, being a gross weirdo. The kid did some surprisingly great acting in the scene where he had to confront his dad. Like, shockingly great emotional acting from a child. After everything this movie does, I just have to wonder why. What was the point of any of it? Why did I have to sit through the conversation about how a piece of shit dad wouldn't rape his kid, but just jerk off to him? Why did I have to see Philip Seymour Hoffman call a woman and threaten to rape them? The point is to be uncomfortable and awkward, to make you squirm, but why? Why is that the point? It never leads anywhere. It never gets some big conclusion that wraps the movie up. At best, you could say the dinner scene is where everything leads to, but like, that's not a payoff a movie needs, just kind of them sitting and talking. No sticking point makes this movie just gross for the sake of it. Voyeuristic. The movie gets off on showing you deprived places, how it's willing to go there, wanting you to indulge in the antisocial norms. And I watched this gross ass movie all because of Andrew Garfield. This dude got to go into a closet filled with some of the greatest movies ever, and he chose this shit? Crazy. I scratched what I said about him being everyone's fourth favorite Peter Parker. Dude is fifth. Apologies to Yuri Lowenthal. 1940s time, the decade that has some great politics and human rights going on. I did make a list for the Criterion Challenge in 2024. I did not finish it or even get close though, but I still wanted to check a decent chunk of those movies out, so if they returned in a new category this year, I'd pick them. Bitter Rice is the first of these movies out for redemption. It came out in 1949, barely qualifying for this decade of films, so we are in post-war Italy where neorealism has taken over. Bitter Rice takes place at a rice field in Italy. I had no clue there were rice fields in Italy, but I guess so. Two thieves, Walter and Francesca, escape the law by boarding a train with the rice workers on their way to the field for the season. Francesca meets Silvana, a worker who shows her the way of the workers. Silvana is a legal worker and somewhat bumps heads with Francesca, who is an outcast because she is one of the workers without a permit. Despite their differences, the two become close friends over the season. Eventually, the legal workers left the undocumented ones join them, promoting class consciousness. Francesca and Walter break up as Walter plans to steal the rice for profit, and Silvana joins him before being confronted by Francesca and another dude who barely matters, that other guy. One of the best scenes of the movie is when the two women face each other, guns in hands, pointed at each other and talk it out. Francesca gets Silvana to her senses, helps her realizes that Walter is using her. They kill Walter and save the rice fields. Off the top, I'm an expert on Italian neorealism, noir, and the American style that this movie blends. Like I wrote my thesis on this area film history level expert, and by that I mean I took one film history class before dropping out, and I have the most basic grasp on what these terms mean. Bitter Rice did not perfectly match the idea of neorealism I had in my head. I had it categorized as a social movement and a matter-of-fact plain filmmaking. It presents movies as duller than typical to mirror real life, but this movie did romanticize some of the elements, leaning into the American over-opulence, particularly Silvana. She was quite sexual and represented a more polished lifestyle as associated with American movies around the time. Bitter Rice clearly did this purposefully, blending the two styles. Director Giuseppe De Santis believed the same stuff other neo-realists did. He was a Marxist, and this movie preaches for solidarity among the working class. But this form it takes made people reject it. Leaning into Americanism made people not want it. But I love having used the style of overconsumption to look at these themes, and come to the conclusion that these two worlds can coexist. I might have just spat a bunch of nonsense. As I said, I don't have the fullest grasp on these terms, but I think that was the read on the whole situation. And I know even less about what makes a movie a noir, but this one didn't feel like one. Also, the setting plays into the messaging. Being a rice field that requires these women to work hard through heat and exhaustion. Their labor is being exploited to the max. They needed to come together or it was all meaningless. It can be hard to look out for the collective when it is so hard to be on your own, but Bitter Rice is about doing the hard for the sake of the people. On the technical front, it's great. The actors are really good. Silvana being the standout towards the end. It was hers and a few others' debut film. I will never not be amazed at just how fast some people pick up on acting in movies, and Bitter Rice is gorgeous. The composition of shots put together phenomenally. So many individual moments of this could be painted. One of the biggest compliments I can give to a movie is that I would hang frames of it on my wall. And there are some snapshots in this that would be great on the wall. DeSantis used these technically impressive crane shots that look out of the place during the time, but just add so much of a visual flair to the movie because he was so ahead of his time. I'm a little mixed on the story. The first half of the movie is about the solidarity between the women, and both labor and their individual lives. The two of them clash, one of them illegal and the other registered. The clash of morals over the necklace, one wearing white while the other wears black. Their loves are opposed to each other, representing the same idea of the two distant styles, but the two women still come together. That is the core of the movie, solidarity between the women and the workers, both those ideas being present. I really dug the evolution of this story. Then it started to drift into the men, about their relationships with Walter. This part was less good. I don't care about this motherfucker sneaking around to steal rice, but they tied it all together in the end. The men temporarily took some agency from the women, yes, but in the end, Francesca and Silvana were the ones making making the decisions and controlling the movie, returning to the solidarity the two of them shared, this time over their hatred of Walter and desire to save the rice, to not let down their other workers. Francesca convinced Margot to leave the field. He would have been useless without her. Then Silvana shoots Walter in one of the coolest kills ever. His arm getting caught and hanging on a hook is badass. It was a very satisfying end to the noir element throughout. So looking back, the women kept their agency throughout, and it ended up looping around to the parts I liked. The power was never really taken away from the women. It just seemed like it was for a second. There were brief moments they made decisions because of a man, but the men never made the decisions for them, which I think is super important in keeping the messaging of the film alive. I don't really get why Silvana killed herself though. My two thoughts are that she missed Walter, or the better thought being she is guilty about ruining so much of the work by flooding the rice. I like the ending, so that's what I'm rolling with. Then the women came and poured some rice on her body. I love this. It's a way of honoring her sacrifice. She could have just lived though. This movie was a finalist for the Palme d'Or and got nominated for an Oscar. Bitter Rice really got me thinking about my video last year reviewing every movie to win Best Picture. I went through and said what I would have given the win to, every single year. 1949 would so easily go to Bitter Rice. Rather than the nothing fest of a movie that was All the King's Men, it is such a strong movie, on the technical, story, and messaging front. Really the triple threats of movies. Back when I watched it, I rated it only a 4.5, but I think so much of this movie is the masterful use of cinema. I'm trying to remember why I didn't give it that last half star. My only assumption has to do with when I watched it. There was a 2-month-ish period where I watched very few movies and connected with even less. This was the beginning of fighting that spark again. I'm sure I'll rewatch this someday, and I can't see this not going up to 5 star, but it does not count for the official 5 stars right now. Category 12 was the Pick a Movie from Celine Song's Top 10 Movies of All Time list. I love Past Lives and like the Materialist. She surely has to have a banger list, right? I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of Barry Lyndon, and The Age of Innocence is a bottom 3 Scorsese movie. God damn, maybe she has awful taste. I just kind of picked one and landed on Pina. Off the top, this is probably one of the shortest sections of the video. I still have a ton to dig into here. This is less of a movie and more a filmed performance dance sequence. It was put together by a dance troupe to honor their deceased choreographer, Tanzather Pina Bach, after she died. She had worked on a lot of these pieces and chose them before her death. Her focus was on strange dance numbers that act as performance art. You would not be hitting any of these in the club. There were some powerful individual shots and camera movements. The score helped guide me where the movie wanted to take me. I believe in there being 2 distinct worlds that movies live in, as art and entertainment. As art, this is a beautiful piece, a mature reflection on a friend and a mentor for these people. It meant something to them, far more than just an avenue to make money. But as entertainment, this movie does nothing for me. I just didn't have a good time with it. It felt overly silly and nonsensical. That largely falls on me for not being able to understand what is going on. I couldn't tell the difference in details with any dance number, let alone one as dense and meaningful as this. There are movies out there that value art over entertainment, and I love, but that is because I see the artistic achievement and get what they were going for. But for me, a movie shines when it mixes the 2 worlds. Pina is not a bad movie. It's just one not for me. I respect it a lot. What it meant to the people who made it. This is a piece of art that should exist in the world. People should feel free to express themselves as radically as Pina herself did. I'm glad I watched it even if I was a little bored throughout. I looked through the 1950s movies and landed on Akira Kurosawa's Rashamon. Last year, I had 7 Samurai on the list, but I just wasn't ready to watch it and I put it off. It was the movie that derailed the entire thing. So this year, I came in and tempered my expectations. I went for an earlier, smaller Kurosawa, one that I would be able to digest. Trigger warning, there is some small talk of sexual assault during this part. It is not the main focus, but I do mention it briefly. Time code on screen to skip. Rashamon is about a trial in Japan. Tajimaru is suspected of having killed a samurai. The movie uses a monk, a woodcutter, and another guy talking about the events to stage itself. While they talk about what happened, the audience is shown flashbacks. It first takes you how Tajimaru retold the event. He says after tricking the samurai, he raped his wife, and then the 2 of them had an honorable fight in which he won. The wife, Masago, gets her turn, and it of course differs. She says he left after the assault. She untied her husband and fainted, waking up to him having killed herself. A medium recounts the events on behalf of the samurai. Finally, the woodcutter claims he was there and saw the murder by a sword, but he lied to cover his own. There were 2 main interpretations I can see coming out of this movie. The first one I didn't connect with as much. That is, that perception is reality. These people tell stories that they believe in, their mind warping events to satisfy their deeper wants. I have been thinking about Survivor and Big Brother a lot lately, and perception is very much reality on these shows, so that's why I think this was a part of my mind. I just don't think that the warping of events and to keep your mind safe makes that much sense in this, or is satisfying. But what I land on is these retellings retellings are purposefully untruthful. Everyone is presenting the world they want to believe in. Tajamaru presents an epic battle where he was brilliant. He wants people to believe that he won this fight. He is not a bum and should be treated as a noble hero. He doesn't believe it, but he wants others to. Then Masako retells her half of the story, which I believe to be the closest to the actual events. She was assaulted and her husband stares at her. This is where I think she starts to lie. She says she fainted and when she woke up her husband was dead. I believe it was Masako who killed him. She cannot admit to killing her husband, of course. The very fact she was a woman who had been married would ruin her life. It would be extra worse if everyone knew she killed her husband. She also knows what happens, but presented the world to others that makes her look the most innocent, knowing if she is anything other than the perfect victim, she will be eaten alive. I don't care about the medium story, he was just bullshitting based on what he had already heard. He brings nothing new and uses the stated stories to make up a believable one to get others to actually think he's a medium. Then there is the woodcutter, whose story is all kinds of lying to me. He makes up part of the story that nobody else had brought up, stuff that would make the other two look better. He, like the medium, took pieces of other stories to satisfy his own world. I don't think he saw the events unfold at all. If his story was real, why would he steal the dagger? He knew the events and knew the dagger would come up. He has realized post-trial that he can get attention by pretending to have seen what happened. Seeing a murder is a lot cooler than just stumbling onto a dagger and the words and taking it. The priest and the other guy have shown interest in the story. If he pretends to have seen, patched together a plausible sounding timeline, he gets some social clout. So in the end, I take away that this is a story about a woman being assaulted, then vilified by her husband. Out of rage and hurt, she kills him. Everyone else around her uses this to advance themselves socially. It's incredibly tragic. She's the victim in the act and then hurt further by the rejection of her husband and forced to relive it again by the court, with her attacker twisting the events into the narrative that helps him. The reason for only 4 stars here is that I had to fill in some of the gaps. Then there were a few extra points that I felt like took away from things, such as the baby at the end and the priest's line about having his faith restored. The priest mentions that this is one of the worst stories he has ever heard, although the greed and selfishness disgust him, and he is reassured by the woodcutter taking a baby home. All the woodcutter has to say is that he will raise the baby as one of his own. So it doesn't click as an end. The sky literally parts ways and it stops raining for an ending that doesn't satisfy the depths of the story it went to. Taking a baby doesn't make him any less selfish, doesn't help heal Masako or bring justice. The movie wanted a happy ending and a positive outlook it frankly didn't deserve. This is pretty much the original movie that tells the same story from a bunch of different perspectives. It did so in such a great way, paving the path. There is truth and lies in every single version of this, which is key. The movie never solves the puzzle, comes out and tells you that there is a correct answer. This kept me ruminating on the movie past its runtime. My first Kurosawa was a successful one. I don't know why I ever wait this long to watch the classics. They are always solid movies. I am so glad I didn't start with an all-timer of his. There's room to get better too. This category was to pick a movie off of a list called All-Time Favorites from the Criterion website. I have no clue how this list was picked, but I went with the quintessential Hong Kong Jackie Chan movie, Police Story. This movie is about Police Sergeant Chan Kei-koo, played by Jackie Chan. He was undercover in a crime ring led by Chow Tai. He successfully captures Tao, even though there is a lot of destruction in the process. Tao gets out of jail by doctoring evidence. Chan is put on a new case, being the personal security for Tao's former secretary, who plans on ratting him out, Selena. The rest of the movie is the two of them being chased by Tao's men and having to escape. Chan also has to explain why he is running around with this girl so much to his girlfriend, leading to some funny moments. Chan is framed for a cop's murder and forced to take everything down without help from the system, even after being arrested, despite pleading with his boss to hear him out. They of course end up stopping Toa, but Chan almost beats him to death. He should get that checked out, go to therapy, typical cop stuff. It might sound like this movie wades into the territory of a damsel in distress, because it does at points. Selena is just a secretary and needs protecting, but she has her own little moments of being badass and protecting herself. When the two are jumped in the parking lot, Chan gets his ass handed to him and is on the verge of losing. It is once Selena pulls a gun on the henchman that causes them to finally run away. The acting performances are kinda peak in this, especially for an action movie. Nowadays, most action has phoned in acting performances focusing on other aspects of the filmmaking. This is our second Maggie Chung movie of the list, and this video, at the very least, is a stand video for her. She didn't have a large role in this, playing the jealous side girlfriend. I love her. She has some great back and forth with Jackie, but this isn't her most standout role. Bridget Lin was fun in her role. Playing the straight man can be hard, but she did enough to stand out as great while doing it. The real star, however, of the show is unfortunately Jackie Chan. He plays the physicality just as well as you would expect, not just in the action scenes. In normal talking scenes, he uses his body to direct the viewer's attention and push the comedy. He was a master of acting to the camera and knowing how to get a laugh. Of course, the fight choreography was great. I don't really know how much of it was Jackie and how much of it was stunt people, but props to every one of evolved. I would assume Jackie did most of the simple fighting, but the stunt team stepped in for some of the more dangerous, less fighty moments. Everything looked good though. It was non-stop exciting action with unique moments to boot. The single moment that sums up why I love this movie so much is towards the end of it. They're fighting in the mall, and Chan needs to get to the bottom floor quickly. There was a random ass pole that he just slid down, crashing the objects in his way, pulling down lights, sparks flying until crashing through a plane of glass at the very bottom. It was an insane moment of glorious action. Then they did an instant replay from 2 more angles, just because it was that fun and exciting of a shot, one that got the blood pumping. As with all Jackie Chan movies, the use of the environment stands out. It's never just dudes fighting. It's dudes fighting using 2 cars to hop up on, using the telephone you found as a weapon, and in the final scene, using the mall in as many wacky ways as you can. Have a clothing store? Chan uses a clothing rack to spin around and fight. The most iconic part is all the glass. They break so much glass through this, leading to so many little payoffs of the shattering. The sound itself is just exciting, let alone the visuals of it. The other reason to praise Jackie for this movie specifically over the rest of the cast is that he directed it. A true all-around threat. It wasn't directed in the most artsy or high caliber way, but it is an action comedy. He doesn't need to do anything more than make the audience laugh and give them some thrills throughout, which he did. Jackie did not write this, instead Edward Tang did. Edward has said that the writing for this movie was abnormal. He didn't build the movie around a story. Instead, Jackie gave him a couple of key locations or props and told him to write the movie around using those in the action scenes. He had to find a way to get an action scene of a small hillside village, a double-decker bus, and a mall all into one movie. I think it is extremely impressive just how well Edward managed to tie together these vague ideas and suggestions for action scenes into a coherent and heartfelt story. The story is not a non-factor in this. Both Chang and Fong are fun protagonists that you root for who turned out to be underdogs by the film's end. Tao was an intimidating villain, but the movie also managed to sneakily squeeze in some ACAB propaganda. It has Chan criticizing the actions of his superior officers and going into business for himself in the name of the greater good. The police are never outwardly villainized. It is more so subtle moments that show how even good-intentioned cops can be at best useless and at worst damning. An outlook I really didn't see coming from this movie. If you are looking for a great time, funny movie filled with mayhem and action, there are a few movies that touch police story. I can see why it would be put on an all-time favorite list. This is the type of movie that doesn't alienate anyone. There isn't anything to push you away. The universal likability shows through, and I think it's another example of how great Hong Kong cinema used to be. For the 1960s, I figured I would just return to Akira Kurosawa. I enjoyed Rashamon that much. Just 2 spots after watching my first, I decided to watch a middle stage Kurosawa. Yojimbo is about a samurai with no lord, or a ronin, Kuwa Batakaha, Sanjuro. He finds a town with 2 competing yakuza, literally splitting the 2 down a line. One side is run by Seibe, who has control over the town's lucrative gambling industry and mayor. The other side is run by his ex-right-hand man, Ushitoro, who has tried to install a new mayor in town. Sanjuro recognizes no one actually wants peace and decides to stay in town until he can wipe out both sides. He plays them against each other by offering his services to the highest bidder. After finding out they plan to assassinate him after he helps, he turns on both of them. He does get beat down, as Ushishoro wins the war, but returns to end the madness and kill all the greedy people left, leaving the town safe from everyone. All it took was a little bit of massacre. Since I watched them so closely together, I think it is only natural that I slightly compare Yojimbo to Rashamon. On the surface, they aren't that similar, but if you dig, you can see some of it. I think Yojimbo is a more consistent movie. There aren't really any flaws to point out, but it also never elevates itself. I tend to be able to overlook a movie's worst parts if the highs are exceptional, but this movie doesn't have that problem. Kurosawa is still a very good director, knowing how to use lighting and composition to get the most out of every shot. I noticed it felt very similar to Rashamon, a decent amount. Some of the same camera movements, the lighting hitting the characters the same way. I thought this was all down to Kurosawa's directing style, but it turns out that the cinematographer, Kazu Miyagawa, worked on both movies. The first 2 Kurosawas he did. I just so happened to pick 2 movies by the same cinematographer. Yojimbo does have my favorite individual shot from any movie so far. Partway through, Sanjuro sits up on a peak in the middle of town, a watchtower, as the 2 competing sides of towns slowly shuffle in from either side. It is shot from an extremely low, down on the ground, angled upwards at the samurai. The way the 2 groups nervously fill the sides of the frames, horizontally, with Sanjuro right in the middle of them. It sums up the whole movie perfectly while being one of the most visually pleasing shots in cinematic history. This is a frame I need a large printout of, and I will be looking into that. The main story is definitely good, a movie steeped in amorality, No side is good, not even the main character. He is just as greedy and desperate as others. He just manages to kill a little less innocent people than the others. There aren't many nuances to him, which I found a little frustrating. He is a very cool character. Large strides and confident, sword by his hip, score swelling. But that's all he's got. A surprisingly thin character for how much monologuing he does and how much time we get with him. He reveals nothing when talking to the innkeeper, leaving the movie feeling a little two-dimensional. I wanted some motivation. Why is he this way? Why the brooding attitude is ever present? Add another layer to the two-sided war. His personality at any given point is a reflection of who he is talking to, which doesn't feel great. The standout of the crafts is the production design. A real looking old town, and the costumes put you in the time zone. I love a good old period piece that commits to the time period accuracy, always helps boost the movie that little bit. This will be my last Kurosawa for the video. Doing two so close together was fun. I was able to compare and contrast them, but I feel like a third is pushing the limits of what my goal is. It is to try and branch out, diversify my cinematic palette. There was a real consideration to putting High and Low on this list in a later spot. It would be easy to watch and go along with Spike Lee's remake, but it came down to watching another 60s Japanese movie from the director for the third time, or I could go with an Indian rom-com about happiness. I went for diversity in the spirit of the challenge. Kurosawa has left an impression on me from these two movies. I will be watching more and diving into his filmography with more time. He's clearly a master of film. These two movies haven't put all the pieces together, but show some real promise. As time goes on, I will dive into the bigger, more dense movies. Maybe for next year's challenge, I'll find an excuse to watch those, but I really enjoyed this one. Category 16 was any movie out of print in the physical collection. One of them really caught my attention. The movie starring Bruce Willis, Steve Buscemi, and Ben Affleck, directed by Michael Bay. I just had to see what a Michael Bay movie that deserved the criterion stamp of approval looked like. The movie opens in the most basic way ever. A voiceover describing how the dinosaurs were killed off by a meteor. Then we see in space, a meteor shower wiping out a shuffle. NASA figures out they have 18 days to find a way to stop the impact with Earth. They want to send a crew up to dig into the middle of an asteroid, put a couple nukes in there, and blow that shit up. Typical American government response: if you don't like something, just blow it up. They recruit oil drill man Harry Stampler to train astronauts to drill. He says it is simply too complicated and they will have to train his crew of wacky side characters to go to space, one of whom is Ben Affleck's AJ Frost, and is in a relationship with Harry's daughter, Grace. The crew set off into space, and this movie gets crazy. Some of the ships get damaged, drilling goes slower than expected, the president threatens to nuke them all anyway, Paris gets flattened by a meteor, but the French aren't real people, so it doesn't matter. Due to machine failures, one of the men has to stay behind and remotely detonate the bomb. AJ draws the short stick, but Harry locks him in the ship, finally accepting Grace and AJ's relationship. Harry blows up the meteor and saves the day while dying. Off the bat, the plot of this movie doesn't hold up to the slightest bit of scrutiny. If you think about it for even a second, things fall apart. Ben Affleck has even brought this up to the scriptwriter. He asked, why is it easier to train oil drillers to be astronauts than it is to train astronauts to drill? A valid question, I think. And he was told to shut the fuck up. They didn't really care to make any of it make sense. I've never been one to harp on about plot holes. Just make the movie entertaining. But the entire premise of the movie being flawed is quite something. Every little moment of it made no sense distracting from other elements. It doesn't break the movie, but helps chip at its level of quality. What matters more here is the emotional through line around Harry, Grace, and AJ. Harry, as a mentor to AJ, almost a father figure, guides him through the world of drilling and trusts him with his life. You have to trust the people you work with in such a dangerous field, but he refuses to bless the relationship with his daughter for some reason. I think out of the two, the AJ-Harry relationship is much more emotionally resonant than the one with his own daughter, probably because it is given more time. It works just well enough to keep the through line. The Harry-Grace relationship is fewer and further between, but they do have some deep interactions, before he leaves and his call from the asteroid. The highlight of the movie was the first half. It was boys being dumbass bros and having fun. A lot of comedy of the fish out of water, failing all the tests. All the side characters were funny, their demands for the mission including having minor traffic infringements expunged from their records. This part of the movie just passed the vibe check. The montages of everyone training, building the stakes up. Isn't it crazy that once they go to the action, the crazy setup starts paying off? I don't care anymore. None of the suspense felt believable, and when the members of the crew died, I felt nothing. They weren't anything more than comic relief side characters. All of the emotion was focused on the main three. This section just went on and on. It dragged out. This is a 2-hour, 20-minute movie, not a tiny runtime. I was definitely checking out from time to time during the second part when they were in space. Michael Bay as a filmmaker gets a lot of flack from general online sentiment. Some of it is deserved, he has made some proper dogshit movies, but I quite enjoyed the frantic action of Ambulance. It is a properly underrated movie from the last few years. You can see his style quite clearly in Armageddon. Armageddon does not understand the word slow down. There's a jump cut on average every 1.5 seconds. It is kind of nauseating. The action and talking scenes are both hard to distinguish what is happening. This is too many cuts. A hyperactive style of editing that feels like a college student trying to be stylish, but it just doesn't work for me. I don't understand how anyone can watch this and not get at least a little headache. Brother, breathe. Take a second. Sometimes a shot lingering looks cooler. It's similar to wrestling, honestly. For years, the head of production at WWE was a dipshit named Kevin Dunn. He would cut to different cameras whenever somebody would hit a move, cut for seemingly random reasons. It made the show all that much harder to watch. This movie reminded me of him, so it was kinda dead of me for making me think of that loser. Then, this is somehow the highest grossing movie of 1998. More people paid to get dizzy than they paid to watch any other movies. It was bad enough on my laptop screen. I can't imagine what it would feel like to see this one on the big screen. My least favorite scene of this was when AJ and Grace have a picnic. I was deeply uncomfortable. They were playing with animal crackers and put some of them down their underwear right there in public. Fucking gross and weird. Then they started whimsically musing about how they are so unique and quirky, asking if they think anyone else in the world is doing this. No, you freaks, nobody else is shoving animal crackers down their partner's pants. Stop doing it. I put this in the challenge and went to watch it. At the time, I couldn't find it on any streaming. I was considering giving it the boot until one night it randomly came across my YouTube recommendations. It was just sitting there on YouTube for free and I somehow overlooked it. A little blessing of not having to switch it out. This movie is dumb and bad, but at least add a little heart in there and have fun first half. Shout out to my boy Steve Buscemi. That's my GOAT. The 1970s has so many movies to choose from. I went with The Life of Brian from good old Monty Python crew. I liked Holy Grail, but their work is just a huge blind spot for me overall, so I thought it would be nice to explore further. I love British people and their funny jokes. It is about Jesus and his journey to being hung on the cross. That is the story. This is an aesthetic I don't really vibe with. I just have such a bad experience watching shitty Christian propaganda movies at relatives' house, or just being on the TV. I'm gonna come out and say it, we've hit a dud section of the video, a stretch of movies that I don't care a whole lot about and found mediocre to bad. These sections are always hard to make. I lose motivation to work on the project if all I am doing is complaining. But it feels disingenuous and cheating to switch these out. I also find it hard to make criticizing movies fun sometimes. So maybe bear with me for this one and the next two, then we can get back to some exciting cinema, or completely dogshit cinema. The Life of Brian is a comedy, one that is trying very hard to be funny and failing. I can think of a single joke that landed. When the guy is defacing the Colosseum and the guard catches him, the guard scolds the man on his grammar of the message and not for the act of rebellion. This is a funny, well-constructed joke. Set it up, misdirect, then something happens to pay it off. If only every joke was that funny, this would have ruled. But instead we get miss after miss. The cheese stuff didn't land, fucking biggest dickest didn't get me to laugh. That is how unfunny of an environment this movie made. I should laugh at biggest dickest. Like if I was scrolling down Instagram Reels and saw a sketch and the punchline is biggest dickest, I would laugh. But the delivery just failed most of the time with fine writing. Or the writing sucked to begin with. The movie is just so goddamn annoying. I have landed on the conclusion that this might be a generational thing. There's a chance it's geographical, but I never met anyone under 25 who loves Monty Python. Sketch comedy and all comedy ages weirder than any other genre. It is so time relevant, so it isn't built to last forever and certain types or styles don't land anymore. And Monty Python was never something an older, wiser person passed down to me, so I didn't have a chance to be molded by this group. Instead, I grew up on the internet and found stuff like The Lonely Island funny. I'm sure on a technical level this is funny. This movie also didn't age well. And before the next section, I want to clarify that even the jokes that did age well weren't funny. But it's too awkward to hear rape jokes just thrown around without care. Blackface is funny, right? They should do that. Then the mom character, I fucking hate her, and the tired old transphobic jokes that were played out in the 70s, let alone now. And with this mom character, the transphobic jokes are one thing, but that voice is ear-piercing, grating, and truly unacceptable. There was no excuse to put that in film. These elements make that movie that much harder to revisit. This might sound insane, but I'm not sure what the name of this movie is. The wiki seems to call it Monty Python's Life of Brian, but the Letterboxd page only has it as Life of Brian. The Holy Grail page does include Monty Python though. So which is it, movie? Is it Life of Brian or Monty Python's Life of Brian? I desperately need this answered. 0 stars off of this alone. I just don't think the Monty Python crew fully works for me. Their style of humor misses far more often than it hits, making watching any of their stuff a slog. I thought Holy Grail was fine, and this was bad. I don't want to give up on them. But should I really keep trying if I watched their 2 big favorites and didn't really like either of them? Category 18 is William Friedkin's Closet Picks. The movie most people know him by is The Exorcist, but the only thing I've seen that he's directed was The French Connection, which won Best Picture. I was down to only a couple movies on this list. I had seen M from his picks, and 2 others were on this list elsewhere. 8.5 is one of those mythical movies everyone talks about. Directors love this movie with everything, so I was hoping it would hit hard. This movie is about Guido, a well-known movie director in Italy. He is the epitome of European art house director, and suffers from director's block at this point, not having the drive to finish his movie and the struggles with his marriage. He's estranged from his wife and has a mistress, but dreams of the perfect woman, and puts that fantasy into his film, and also onto the new actress he has hired for it. Some self-realization later, Guido is pretty broken, but artists do what they have to, and he powers through to make the movie despite his own pain. He convinces these women he treated poorly to keep helping him for some reason, and they make this movie a reality. But most of all, Guido pulls everything together. This is the third of 5 movies about movies on this list, a genre that can peak so high. But this also has some problems I find most infuriating with movies about movies, that being the self-worship, grandiose belief in oneself. Guido is presented as a god in this movie. He creates art that is on another plane of existence, more important than life itself. I believe that movies are important, and art should be appreciated. But like, come on guys, this is too much. It felt like Woody Allen and Annie Hall. This movie wants you to know how smart and great it is, and that annoys me. It turns from cheeky self-importance into a circle jerk real fast. The movie's in that mode for like 35% of its runtime. Also, Guido being a stand-in for director Federico Fellini makes this attitude even more tiresome. The title was a reference to the number of films he had made up until that point. He named the movie after his previous work. It is way too much self-referential glazing for me to get properly into this. Like, there was a lot of good stuff about writer's block. How the world moves fast and you need to keep up, and how being in the public eye affects your personal life. All themes I enjoy and wanted to like, but the mental block was there due to what I've already mentioned. With a movie that has this much hype behind it, it is of course very well made. Doesn't feel like anything else from the early 60s I have seen. No other movie moves quite like this one does. The fantasy scene where he lives with a dozen plus women being a prime example of both the self-fallacious attitude and the technical execution. The camera is at a distance, moving around. The way you see the floor and ceiling almost feels like a stage show. All the movement got a bit tedious at points, like calm down bro, you don't need to prove anything. Directors love this movie a lot. Charlie Kaufman, Martin Scorsese, David Lynch, and fucking Woody Allen have all talked about how much they love this movie. You could just make a whole video on other movies that were inspired by 8.5. And it's kind of obvious why. The layers of a movie about making a movie where the movie is an in-universe movie about a man who goes through problems and is seen as the hero for bringing together everyone and overcoming his own creative and personal problems. Fellini really shows off here, and his brand of being bigger than life and the author of the entire movie is why I think they like it. Everything I know about the guy is that he loves himself and hypes up his own involvement in the movie, taking sole credit for the entire project, which is why directors are drawn to it. They see themselves as the person that does it all. It's an attitude that I generally hate. The idea that any movie is one person's vision only feeds the ego and discredits all the other artists who worked on that piece. Directors can have a strong voice in film, but I hate the idea behind auteurs, and 8.5 perpetuated that. The movie does nothing to show the works from different people that goes into a movie. Then, real-life directors glaze it, feeding into the cycle I don't vibe with. This picked up 2 Academy Awards, which feels both right and wrong. I feel the Academy has a reputation for snubbing international movies, doubly so for the big award, which this didn't win. But I wonder what about this foreign movie made it get the double win. Those were Best Foreign Language Film and Costume Design in Black and White. First off, this is the first I have heard about the former split between color and black and white in costume design, which is crazy. I watched all the Best Picture winners and made a video about them. You think I would have noticed it when writing that, but it just passed me by. I don't fully understand the win. It wasn't anything spectacular in that department, but it did get a director's nom, so the Academy liked the movie and probably just gave it an extra win because they liked it. I really want to like 8.5. It is juggling a lot of plates that I enjoy. Has the vibe of a movie I should be invested in and love. A majority of the movie is great. If it were to trim a little bit and stop being so annoying, it would be amazing. I can accept some self-serious savant messaging in my movies, but this tipped over that limit for me without offering enough that I did love. I don't really love these decade categories, but for the 1980s, I went with Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I wanted a good old coming-of-age high school movie. But why didn't I love the decade categories? I get the idea that you want people to watch movies from all of history. It makes sense, but they just felt too open-ended that it didn't really feel fun to pick. This movie is about a bunch of different high school students dealing with their problems. The sibling duo of Brad and Stacy. Brad is a senior who can't keep a job and gets broken up with. Stacy is a freshman and quite interested in finally having sex. The process is awkward. She gets pregnant and goes to get an abortion. Her friend Linda is the older, misguided mentor who doesn't know what she's talking about but pretends to. There's the friend duo Mike Damone and Mark Rat. They both get involved with Stacy and have some fighting, but in the end, Rat and Stacy enter a relationship but decide not to physically rush anything. Then we have the main character of Shorts, Sean Penn's Jeff Spicoli. He's a stoner surfer dude who cares about nothing. He especially doesn't care about his studies and gets into a feud, ditching class and fighting with history teacher Mr. Hands. Hands tries all year to get Jeff to take things more seriously, and what is the best parts in the movie. On the surface, Fast Times presents itself as a fun coming-of-age movie. It feels like high school because these kids are dumb teenagers making dumb decisions. Jeff gives the movie a lackadaisical feeling. He's an aloof surfer bro, and that rubs off on the whole thing. But this movie goes to some pretty serious points. An outright criminal age gap in sex, problems much bigger than most kids in high school movies have, and abortion. It has become such a heated topic nowadays, I don't think a movie would be able to portray abortion as this one did. Stacy gets pregnant and simply goes to get it aborted. No fanfare, not presented as bad nor good, just a simple part of life. Was there a time in the 80s where abortion wasn't as politicized as it is now? I just find it so fascinating how it aged and show a topic like this. This also leads to one of the best emotional moments of the movie. Stacy doesn't tell anyone other than the guy who got her pregnant, and asks Brad to drop her off to go bowling. He knows something is wrong and follows her to support her. The sibling part wasn't the most explored thing in this movie, but his unwavering support and attempt to comfort her hit the spot for me. I loved it and completely reframed my thoughts on them. Showed that they did care after spending most of the movie arguing. My favorite parts of the movie was Jeff's back and forth with Mr. Hands. The scenes they were in together were the funniest. Jeff ordering a pizza directly to the classroom is a great bit. Sean Penn played the goofball and made it as dumb as possible, while Ray Walton played the counter straight man, Mr. Hands, as angry as he could. I have read that Walton actually got pretty upset with how Penn would act on set, which Penn did to provoke a reaction out of him. A brilliant duo. I find it a little crazy that Jeff is the same dude I watched in one battle after another. The two careers couldn't feel any further apart. The first cut of this movie was given an X rating, the current day NC-17, because it showed full frontal nudity at one point. They re-edited it to reduce the rating, but that doesn't mean they took out all the naughty stuff. It is a little confusing how they got some of this through the rating system. We see plenty of boobs. Linda is very sexualized in the pool scene, but I guess because she's a girl it doesn't matter for some reason. We get the implied vision of Brad masturbating, but they wouldn't dare show that. How inappropriate to show a man masturbating. I'm not saying I needed to see it, but I didn't need to see the sexualization of Linda either. The hypocrisy is very apparent. Pick a lane and stick in it. A fun fact from the production of this movie is that at one point, David Lynch was attached to direct before cooler and smarter heads prevailed. I could not even begin to imagine what a Lynch-directed Fast Times would look like. Also, this is the film that made Nicolas Cage decide to change his stage name. He was bowling on set for being a Coppola, being told he only got the role because of his family name, and that's why he changed it. While I liked a lot of the individual pieces and storylines, I found the movie to be rather disconnected and aimless. There were scenes throughout that felt like they were on the island of their own, just bouncing from character to character, and it never manages to pull everything together by the end. I think it has to do with how disconnected Jeff is from the other kids. He isn't part of the friend group and has no meaningful interactions with them either. I was expecting some kind of conclusive moment where they come together. Instead, all we get is Jeff stopping a robbery at the place Brad works. It was a letdown, so it never fully solidifies into an all-time great. It has inspired and affected countless movies and TV shows that have come after though, and I enjoyed it. Category 20 is to pick a movie with the spine number 451 through 499. As a longtime Community fan, I figured I should watch one of the series' biggest homages. The episode in question was Critical Film Studies, where Abed has a conversation with Jeff in the style of this movie, My Dinner with Andre. This is about two old friends, current playwright Wally, who has been avoiding Andre for a while after he gave up his theater career, but the two of them sit down for some dinner and end up talking about their lives, how they have gone, and how they wish for them to go. Wally is content in his current life, the peacefulness that comes with routine, while Andre says that he is needed to adventure and find different people, experience the world in order to be more human, how comfort is bad. The two respectfully disagree with each of these philosophies and give space to talk them out. They have a back and forth, challenging each other while hearing them out. And in the end, Wally returns home and still finds comfort in the ordinary. But that's all this movie is, a back and forth of these two guys sitting and chatting. I was pleasantly surprised at how well this movie worked for me, because it shouldn't have. On the surface, it is similar to other self-centered wankfesses, pseudo-intellectual based movies or conversations, the type of movie or people who are overly serious and believe these conversations to make them the smartest people. Think back to something like 8½, or some people I had classes with in college, thinking that being able to engage in these philosophical conversations make them a better person than others. The line between obnoxious and fun is very thin. But My Dinner with Andre doesn't fall into those traps, which rules. This movie has its hair down and isn't too wanky. I think because on the surface, it's a silly movie and Andre is a silly character. He is too unserious to be considered a genius, and the wisdoms you can take from him come from life experience rather than any intellectualism, which makes the character more likable. Helping this was how much Andre reminded me of Benjamin Coach Wade from Survivor. Coach is probably my favorite Survivor player ever, a guy who seems delusional but in the most engaging way possible. And Andre reminding me of this persona I already liked helped me endear him to as a character and as a movie as a whole. Even going beyond enjoying it, I felt myself getting a little jealous of the conversation at one point. I don't think I'm able to have this type of conversation just yet, one where you need time and perspective. A place I'm not able to mentally enter just yet at this point in my life. I was deeply interested in this conversation that resonated with me at multiple points, had me wishing I was there, able to engage in it. A movie about reconnecting with old friends and the safety that can be felt in that. So even if their personalities wore me out from time to time, there was the bigger picture of them having each other's back. I have always thought about My Dinner with Andre as the movie with a community episode about it, a TV show I love. I do now have to go and rewatch that episode to see how it feels after this. A fun movie I started watching only thinking about Community, but it won me over after the first third. I do still think that I will mostly associate this movie with is the Abed and Jeff relationship, but it feels a little unfair seeing that movie this way. The happenstance is that the more emotionally impactful thing paid tribute to the OG was seen first. Another decades category, 1990s. This is my highest average decade on Letterboxd, so the movie I picked had some high expectations on it. It was another movie on the list from last year's challenge that I wanted to get to but never managed to. Another Hong Kong action flick, The Heroic Trio. This is the best movie on the list. I love it. This might be the best movie ever, and that wouldn't be close. It is far and away the best movie. The way this movie made me feel is unlike anything else I've experienced in my years of watching. I don't think this is the type of movie that spoilers ruin, but it would be more pure if you would go watch it without the full review, and I beg you to go watch it. I love this movie. There's an evil kung fu master who is preparing for his next heir and stealing babies. Among his ranks in doing the baby napping is Michelle Yeoh's Invisible Woman, but she is starting to question her ways, having to steal from her lover. There's also Anita Moy, wife of a police captain who secretly goes out at night under the Wonder Woman persona, a masked figure who uses her swords and knives to protect the city, all while pretending her husband is any good at helping the city. Then finally, Maggie Cheung's Thief Snatcher, a bounty hunter who rides a motorcycle and uses a shotgun. She goes where the money goes and doesn't have much of a moral compass beyond that. All three of the women were trained together or are related and spend much of the movie fighting for their own self-interest, but at a certain point they have to come together to stop the evil master from world destruction. I spent most of Mother's Day this year with my mother, playing some board games and making her dinner. Then I went to bed and watched this, and I was introduced to 3 new mothers, the 3 main characters in this movie. I love each of them and their dynamics. It goes beyond the characters as well and into the actresses. Michelle Yeoh is a big crossover star in the American market. Maggie also reached a level of stardom, but stayed more in the art house than blockbuster genre. Then there is Anita, a very well-respected actress, but she never tried to break out. I love them all and think they all nailed their roles. Anita and Michelle really carry some emotional weight. Yeoh with her boyfriend having to betray him until it breaks her. Moy with all the baby murder she has found herself unable to stop. Then Maggie Cheung, guys. I'm obsessed with this character. She's everything to me. She is brash and loud, a fun badass, riding motorcycles, firing off shotguns and machine guns. She blows up a bunch of kids at one point. They are evil cannibals and she just throws a stick of dynamite in that pile, doesn't care about it. It's the best character ever. She's just so much fun. While every piece of this works, the titular trios is what really pulls this together. The other massive aspect that I loved in this was the action. A movie hasn't made me feel this this way in a very long time, since RRR. I was pumped and hooked on the action, getting so invested in the outlandishness of it all. A nice mix of action being incredibly well choreographed and pure lunacy. There's a scene where the trio are fighting a scorpion dude at a train station, and all of a sudden, a train just bursts through the wall. There was no real reason for this to happen, but it looked cool, and that is what so much of this movie's charm is. Some of what happens doesn't make sense, but in the best possible way. The extra zaniness of the action isn't all that is offered. There's a lot of great traditional kung fu action and wire work. If you like more grounded fist fighting, the movie has that to offer as well. It is just badass moment after badass moment. I'm in awe how a movie can be this entertaining, how action can be this wild and fast, and why we have lost this style of action to time. This is the movie that makes me miss old Hong Kong cinema the most. Such a unique movie with style oozing out of it that we just don't get anymore. This was my first Johnny 2 movie, and he killed it as director. The look of this is great, particularly the use of lighting and fog. There are bright lights usually directing your attention. Even in the city at night, there is a level of brightness I really appreciate. Then there is so much fog. They pump in a fog and wind machine at every chance they get to give the frame a feeling of being alive, movement to it. The atmosphere is always ready for something cool to happen. I've used this phrase on the channel before, but the heroic trio is actually the aura farming movie, down to using wind machines to make the characters look even cooler. This is a superhero movie, and nothing in the MCU comes even close to as cool as Wonder Woman running over a bunch of wires, sparks flying in a foggy city is. The score is brilliant, partly performed by our lead, Anita Moy. I also love how this movie plays with gender roles. It is so clever. The movie never outright states its agenda that women rule and men are useless. Doing so probably would have made it a little cringy. Instead, it just presented that women can rule and be powerful. A subtle decoration, not calling attention to it, makes it feel more genuine. But looking at this movie, the men are fucking useless. Invisible Woman's boyfriend does some cool science, but he is the guy in the chair and dies pretty easily. The police captain and his crew are useless. Instead, Wonder Woman is the one actually doing the hard work. We're also living this double life as the typical feminine wife. She has the two sides of her, underplaying her success with her husband and then being a badass who saves the day. The character has some physical appearances that feel androgynous, which was a theme for Anita Moy throughout her career, bending typical gender depictions in many of her movies and music. She makes music which I found myself listening to when I need something to help me focus. Her voice is a little lower than most women, and she has done dozens of photo shoots in suits and presented more masculine, while never taking away from her femininity. So retrospectively, looking into the actress makes these themes of the movie stick out even more. Women can do what men do, all while there is still that underlying femininity to her that means something. The character is motivated to protect the babies of the city and has a sisterhood with the other members of the trio, but there isn't a rejection of femininity. Instead, the blending of the roles, which I really enjoyed. The movie is three bad bitches being cool in their own way. Comfortable in that. I also loved the family unit the three of them grew to be. They fought a lot, but in the end, they talked things through and were there for each other. It was nice to see them come together by the end of it. I love the level of care for each other. This is a movie that does so much and it does it well. The melodrama relationship stuff has me invested. Comedy is perfectly outrageous. The action enthralling. The actors are on point. The atmosphere is palpable. I fell in love with this movie while watching it. I think about it all the time and it is so unique. I've yet to find another movie that feels just like this one does. Has a level of energy to it. Maybe it was more a movie that happened to hit me at just the right time. Or maybe it's my favorite thing ever. Very few movies have had the grasp on me, the same way this one did during and after its runtime. It's on HBO Max. Go watch this thing, please. Category 22 was to watch a documentary in the collection, a category I love the idea of. I will always take a push into watching more docs, and I choose one of the more talked about ones out there, Hoop Dreams. This is about William Gates and Arthur Argy, two young African-American students who get recruited by a mostly white school, St. Joseph High School, to play basketball. It details their time there as prospects and how they are treated as outsiders. Gates succeeded on the court, being called Rookie of the Year by many, where Arthur struggles in sports and academics, getting kicked out because his family can't pay after his sponsor drops him. We keep going through injuries and everything else the boys have had happen to them. Arthur is able to lead his team to third overall his senior year, but doesn't get a scholarship and hopes to play in the NBA. While William and his school do middling work, he does get a scholarship to play ball in college. I don't know if I really thought this through, but how the hell do you review a documentary? What really sticks out to me about this movie is two things. First, I'll talk about the filmmaking. Like a fair amount of docs, the filmmaking is rather basic and straightforward. It doesn't ham up on the visuals or go for weird editing tricks, just a mix of raw footage and occasional interviews with B-roll over top of them. It also doesn't need need any more than that. The movie lasts on the strength of its storytelling and interesting subjects. The pace was a little weird, but that comes down to a budget at the start of the project. I had zero problems with the length, coming in at close to 3 hours. Wouldn't have minded a longer movie either. But the movie seemed to move through the boys' early high school days pretty quickly, and they had to. Over the course of the first 2 years, they only filmed for 22 days in total. That is not even a month. They just didn't have the budget and worked on other projects. After sending demos out, they did receive more funding for filming and were able to film 100+ days over the last year. They did almost go a little crazy and throw in some sketch comedy. Thank God they didn't. I really felt the increased time spent with the boys and their family. I don't really feel qualified to speak on the social aspects of this. What I can say is that it felt very prevalent and real to what people of color experience, the harsh realities they face, and having obstacles put in their way. One of the reasons the movie has become as loved as it is comes down to how effective the storytelling is, and how clearly whiteness comes with privilege. That even showed itself on the awards season circuit. Hoop Dreams won the Audience Award for Best Documentary at Sundance, then went on to not even get nominated for the Oscar. The very same year, the Academy heaped praise onto Forrest Gump, one of the whitest, most conservative movies out there. But Hoop Dreams has the final laugh, being a well-remembered and one of my personal favorite docs. Time for the 2000s decade, the decade I was born. I knew one battle after another was coming out, so the natural conclusion was to explore some more Paul Thomas Anderson. When I watched this, I had yet to see one battle, but between watching Punch Drunk Love and writing this video, I have seen it. I have many thoughts on that movie, but it is not the focus here. Punch Drunk Love is. It's about Adam Sandler's Barry, who is lonely and prone to emotional and violent outbursts. He meets Lena, and the two seem to hit it off, but the outbursts don't stop and get worse around his 7 sisters who tease him. While his relationship with Lena progresses, he calls a phone sex line and gets extorted, having 4 guys sent after him for money, causing the anxiety to rise. He secretly accompanies Lena on a trip to Hawaii, and the two have a lovely time. When back, the 4 guys attack Barry and Lena, leading to her going to the hospital, but Barry decided to solve the problem by leaving her there and tracking down who hired the guys, threatening him physically. He returns and Lena says she is mostly hurt by how Barry left her at the hospital, but forgives him anyway. This was my 5th Paul Thomas Anderson movie. I've now seen 6, and I just have to be honest here, I don't get him. There Will Be Blood, which is his best, but it's not good. Then there's Licorice Pizza, Phantom Thread, Boogie Nights, This, and One Battle that are all just incredibly mid or miss the mark in their writing, causing it to crumble. Paul is very talented at directing, and his movies look good. Punch Drunk Love has some great lighting and coloring choices, including when Barry is in a phone booth and it's dark, until he starts to talk to Lena and it lights up. This is great. The execution behind the camera is not the problem. The scripts are. How he presents a problem or world, Barry's outbursts, and doesn't present any real solution for them, but pretends he does. In this movie, you see Barry, who is a very troubled person, lashing out and busting down several glass doors at his sister's party. The blame for this is put on his sisters for how they treat him. He asks if someone can help him find a therapist and gets a yes. But then we never see him go to that therapist and actually put in the work to fix his problems. Instead, he just keeps getting violent, and the only solution the movie presents is his relationship with Lena. She calms him down and gives him an outlet other than violence to distract. This is bad. You should not do this. But the movie presents it as the perfect solution. Yes, connecting with others is one way to help a person as lonely as Barry, but is not the magical solution the movie treats it as. It is irresponsible to treat this reliance on your partner as healthy. You should not be physically violent when separated with them. Then the ending's also pretty dumb. She doesn't care that he once again decided to try and fix his problems with an outburst by confronting the guy who was extorting him. She never took a second to look at just how dangerous he could be, and was. I needed this movie to make this dude go to therapy or build up some kind of coping skills that weren't Lena and their relationship. The standard of the movie was once again Philip Seymour Hoffman. He was always on top of his game, taking interesting roles and excelling at them, but I don't end up liking the movies. Just like Happiness, he stands out as the best part. A shame the 2 movies of his in this challenge have been bad, because I do like what he brings to the table during them. Category 24 is a movie from Giannis Contemporaries, a semi-new classifications of releases through Criterion. These are movies coming straight from theaters and being released physically through Criterion. I'm unsure if they count as actual Criterion movies or are just there to sit at the kid table and be little broed. I juggled through a couple different picks here and landed on The Shrouds, a newer David Cronenberg. This was moved on the list very recently after I got in the horror movie mood, and it killed any love I had for the genre. This happens from time to time in these videos where I talk about a bunch of different movies, where I spend an entire entry dragging a movie that is, in the grand scheme of things, fine. I gave Punch Drunk Love 3 stars. Then the next movie, this one, is utter dog shit. So much so, it makes the movie before it look like the second coming of Casablanca. This is one of those cases. I was harsh to you, Punch Drunk Love, because The Shrouds is such a bad movie. It is insulting to the idea of movies. Crash has a dead wife. He is sad and makes a technology that lets you interact with a live 3D scanning of dead people. He uses this scanning to get his rockers off. The cemetery is attacked, he has sex with his dead sister's wife, all while still using her digital avatar as his assistant. The attack turns out to be some massive conspiracy the United States, Chinese, and Russian governments are all involved in. Fuck this movie. Now, it does feel a bit touchy to criticize this movie, as much as I am about to. This movie is David Cronenberg directly contemplating and dealing with the death of his own wife. It feels wrong to say the way he went about dealing with real personal grief is bad. But at the same time, if you make a movie about said grief and release it to the public, you are asking for it to be looked at and talked about. If he didn't want others' opinions on his grief, he shouldn't have shared it. So, I would be criticizing the movie, not the man behind it. If this is how he deals with grief, like, sure, go off king, I guess. I recently talked about the death of my uncle on this channel, and I debated if I was ready to put those thoughts out for judgment. I decided I was. If Cronenberg wasn't, oopsie, he shouldn't have released the movie. The Shrouds has such a gross reflection on death, a gross way of grieving. It isn't about being sad someone died. It is about being sad you can't have sex with your wife anymore because cancer messed up her body. He doesn't miss her company or feel bad that a person has died. He's sad that his favorite boob doesn't look the same. Not that his wife's body is deteriorating or the pain she went through. The most self-centered way of grieving ever. I can't get on board with such a selfish view of people that you claim to love. Karsh is a disgusting person that doesn't love his wife, but her body. He sexualizes her in death and suffering, removing any human elements of him as a main character. Detestable and despicable. Unlikable leads don't kill movies. There is a way to do it, but this movie is completely disinterested in criticizing Karsh for his actions. I assume this is because he's a stand-in for the writer-director, and that person doesn't have the self-awareness to see what is wrong with this thought philosophy. He's treated as a helpless, depressed person who is manipulated by foreign governments. He isn't a piece of shit, he was just being used by the Russian or Chinese government, and he was all well-reasoned. Instead, his grossness is played off as a result of some global conspiracy. Please don't criticize him, guys. It is all the foreigner's fault. He doesn't see anything other than sexual value in women's life. There was no accountability for his action, moves the blame down the line to the so-called bad guys. I gave this shit a 1 star on Letterboxd, and I think I'm so dumb for that. Why is it not a half star? I might have been sick in the head. This might actually be worse than the 2006 Crash. A movie so gross and voyeuristic I feel wrong bringing even more attention to it. Just go talk to someone, move on, and have sex with someone new while you hold your grief for your wife separately. I'm pissed. I need to go for a walk. Like, it's so cold outside. I'm just gonna go on to the next movie. 2010's time. There's one big movie from this decade that when I tell people I haven't seen, they would be shocked. Not just movie fans, like normies who only watch 3 movies a year. That is Uncut Gems. Howard owns a high-end jewelry store in New York where he works with a lot of famous people. He makes good money but overspends it by gambling and other luxuries. He owes debts to a loan shark, of course, but hopes this one necklace will be enough to pay off those debts. Kevin Garnett, a basketball player, takes interest and they do this weird trade for the night, but Howard sells the NBA ring he gets and gambles it all. It's a pretty basic cycle of whenever Howard gets a little bit of capital, instead of paying his debts, he just gambles it away. In the end, he places a massive bet that pays off on Garnett, but the dude's murdered anyway. This is my first and only movie directed by either Safdie brothers so far, and I'm not in love with it. Typically I do vibe with high anxiety movies, but prefer the boiling plot style to what this was. Uncut Gems was all gas on the stress front, never letting up for even a second, and I found this pace to be a little exhausting. Too in my face. Every bad decision was screamed in the movie. Look how Howard just gambled and lost more money, isn't that bad? I wish it was a little subtler in the messaging and let it build a little slower and naturally. But even with that being said, it was great when it did strike that balance. There were scenes that perfectly mixed the yelling and score to create the right level of stress. Adam Sandler is probably at his best here. I know that's a very low bar, but he clears it and does some actual serious acting. Gives the movie a lot of the lifeblood it has. There was a lot of talk around his Oscar snub, which I don't feel knowledgeable enough to say if he was snubbed. I haven't seen 3 of the other noms this year, but it does feel a little weird, especially with how he was like 7th for Hustler that year. People were legitimately considering predicting him for Hustle, and he didn't get a nom for a much more loved movie. Sandler wouldn't be in my top 5 for the year, but I could see why he would be there for other. Then Kevin Garnett was legitimately impressive for a sports crossover star. All he had to do was play a heightened version of himself, but he nailed the role he was given. I'm in a weird spot with this movie and how others see it. There are some people who despise the yelling and frantic feeling. Then there are others who saying this movie made them feel more than any other movie, and calling it one of the greatest of all time. I can kinda see both points, but I'm sitting in this corner thinking it was solid, but nothing more than that. Which I think makes me feel less connected to the movie. There are these big device films that people feel passionately about. Then when I don't, it makes me disappointed. I want to feel something more than I do now. I wish I hated it. I wish I loved it. Anything other than indifference. This category was Bill Hader's second time doing the closet picks, and this dude straight up robbed the closet. He picked 35 movies in total, including some bundles. Bill, are you really that strapped for cash? You can't buy any of these movies? You needed to be offered a bunch of free rides? Crazy work. I don't have that fond of a history with Hader. I've seen him in some movies, of course, but not anything I was blown away by, to the point of even being annoyed with him in some stuff like Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Superbad. But that doesn't mean his taste in movies is bad. I went with Real Life because the header for Letterboxd is funny looking. Filmmaker Albert Brooks has an idea for his next big project, a documentary following the typical perfect American family for a year to depict American life. The Yeagers, Mom Jeanette, Dad Warren, and 2 kids. The filming process is very overbearing, and Albert inserts himself into the family's drama, picking sides and playing therapist. The psychological assigned to make sure the family is okay strongly disagree with Brooks' method, but he doesn't listen. The doctor takes to the press to expose just how abusive Albert was to the family, getting the project shut down. The Yeagers also end up hating Albert, so Albert is now a visionary artist who had his baby taken away from him and does the only sensible thing a man can do, burn down the Yeagers' house. How is this the second movie where the main character has just started burning down houses at the end for no real reason? I love reality TV. I have already referenced it during this video in the My Dinner with Andre section. In my opinion, there are a couple different genres of reality TV. The best to me is the game show ones. Survivor, The Challenge, Big Brother, where every season there are people competing to win. Then there are the love ones. Love Island, Too Hot to Handle, Love is Blind, The Bachelor. These take people and force them to find love. Finally, my least favorite kind of reality TV show, to the point where I just won't watch them, is the people living their lives. The Real World, Housewives, The Kardashians, Teen Mom. There are so many random families that have an entire multi-season shows on TLC for some reason. It's littered with them. This is the type of show Real Life was predicting and satirizing the idea of. The movie came out before the boom, but actually reflects those shows. There were a few when this came out, but it did predict the genre and where it would go. So while on the surface it might seem like I'd be down to see the satirizing of shows I love, entering the world, it is just barely not the types of shows I like, and more so, what I have absorbed through cultural osmosis. Real Life mirrors the TV we have in this genre years before the exploitation became apparent. I was finding it a little hard to get on board with this movie during the first half. It was setting up. Albert had to gain the family's trust, and the movies had to gain our trust as well. Then Albert dived deeper and deeper into his madness and control. He abandoned the thesis he set up of trying to show normal life in America by extending his artistic reach. He wanted control over the final project, not to observe. He stopped seeing the Yeagers as real people and instead characters in a story that he had to shape and affect, get what he wanted out of it. The more insane he got, the more I enjoyed the movie. You need to do that setup, but it was the weaker section of the movie. Albert Brooks co-wrote and directed a movie in which he leads as a characterized version of himself that is an over-the-top control freak egomaniac. It is incredibly bold and a level of self-gesturing rarely seen in Hollywood. He was willing to be vulnerable and bold. Writing and directing on this is so energetic, witty, and scathing. He had something to prove, and got that off of his mind with this movie. I am only vaguely familiar with his other works, but this seems like him at his most bold, and I really enjoyed seeing it. This movie was a one-man production and show. The performance Albert gives here is everything. The manic desperation or the subtle emotional manipulation, all great. The movie was funny, got a couple laughs out of me, but I don't think there were any all-timer gags. But consistency in comedy is worth noting. I do find the camera helmets to be quite funny. I guess the comedy is similar to the works of the person who suggested the movie, Bill Hader. Solidly funny, but not fully my thing. Similar to the thought process with Punk's Drunk Love and PTA, but for the 2020s I went with Joachim Trier's The Worst Person in the World. Needless to say, this movie has me excited to watch Sentimental Value. Julie is your typical late 20s protagonist. She has spent her life going from degree to degree, from one career path to another, and like all late 20-something-year-olds, she ends up dating a dude 15 years older than her, Axel. One night, she crashes a wedding and meets Elvind. The two share the night and get close but refuse to cheat. Soon she realizes how unhappy she is in life, and with Axel, so she breaks it off and she starts seeing Elvin, but it doesn't fix anything and she still feels empty. Axel gets cancer around when Julie gets pregnant. There are mixed emotions about whether she should keep the baby neither parent wants. She wants to get back with Axel, but his ass dies and she has a miscarriage. A few years later, she is still doing photography and sees Elvin with a woman and a baby and is still unsure how to feel about it. I feel shockingly seen by this movie. Like I've talked about, the ideas presented in this in therapy. I'm going to try not to overshare, but I might. It is unashamed to be a messy modern dating rom-com. The movie movie knows the reality of what relationships can be. It presents that emotion and feelings brutally. A rom-com that isn't fun, doesn't say how easy love is. I was going along with the movie for a decent chunk of this, enjoying it, until one moment where everything clicked together. There's this line where Julie says she feels like a passenger in her own life, a supporting character. She doesn't have agency, no control over herself and her surroundings. Life has swept her by, other people using her. In essence, she doesn't know herself or how she got where she is. This line made the movie click, made me understand. It spoke so deeply to some feeling I have about myself that I saw eye to eye with Julie. Put me on her level rather than me just being an observer. I was a part of the emotions from here on out. Why the hell is this movie on Tubi? What is considered to be one of the best movies of the decade is just free on Tubi. I love it, but it feels a little disrespectful. They could have gotten some money out of this thing. The level of craft here, specifically in the lighting, centering on the people, when Julie is in a happy state, she is lit with golden lighting, or crystal clear and bright. They really make her facial expressions stand out. Then there are points where they remove a lot of the light on certain characters, making you focus on the key ones. Julie is in the shadows when she is feeling super unseen in her relationships. It is a brilliant, along with the undertones of green throughout. So many shots have just a little bit of green to them. Renee Reinsve is the GOAT. She was everything in this. So good, it feels a little redundant to praise her. Hey yo, time to get woke, baby. This movie is pretty icky pertaining to women in the general characterization of Julie at points. She is presented as quirky and different through the lens of a male writer. Feels like she leans a little heavily onto the manic pixie dream girl stuff. A lot of her thoughts and opinions are cringy. The way she talks about feminisms or periods is less than stellar. The whole line about can a feminist give head is, well, how do I put this? It's pretty stupid. She starts to lose herself throughout the film and becomes a mirror of the men in her life. It is nothing too over the top, but I have to mention there are layers of oddness here. All you had to do was run the script by a woman and let her make like 5 changes and this problem would be fixed. The bigger parts of the movie do overshadow this aspect though. Worst Person in the World has flaws, but at its core, the emotion shines through and has sat with me ever since I watched it. Category 28 was a noir and neo-noir movie, a genre I've never really dived into, one of my biggest blind spots. I can't remember my thought process exactly, but I assume I wanted to get some older movies on here, and choosing one during the heights of the noir felt right. So I went with Gilda, another movie on Tubi. You could probably complete the entire challenge, not mine, on Tubi. That would be fun. Johnny Farrell is a cheating gambler who gets to a high-class casino and gets caught, but he's offered to be the manager. You have to be a cheater to know how to catch one. His boss, Mudson, comes back from America with a new wife, Gilda. Gilda and Johnny have a past, but they hide it. He walked out on her because of his insecurities when they were together in the past. She plays the two men off each other, but they mostly just fight between each other. There were Germans who try to kill everyone, a fake death, and Johnny and Gilda marry, even though all their fights. After some good old cheating and murder, they escape together to live happily ever after. The star and center of the movie is very clearly Rita Hayworth's titular Gilda. In a way, the movie was made as a launching pad for Rita, and it worked. She kills this role, giving it every little bite, every piece of nuance that the character has. Going purely by surface level looks and vibes, Gilda is your typical femme fatale. As someone who hasn't watched many noirs, I don't know the trope in noir specifically. The closest character I have to directly compare her to is Sylvana in The Bitter Rice. Gilda is the image that Bitter Rice was playing with, a beautiful woman who uses her looks in flirty ways to get what she wants. Seductive, evil women who are no good. Gilda even popularized the go-to look for femme fatales. The black dress and gloves. The way she takes the gloves off. It's just too sexy. She has to be an evil woman. But this movie goes way further than that. It doesn't reduce her down to just her flirting. It gives great sympathy for her. Johnny is the one who prescribes these traits onto her. His insecurities make him question her loyalty. That is why he left. Men treat her as nothing more than this seductress, hoping she would prove them wrong. But Gilda leans into making them upset. She only does all the flirting in front of either Johnny or Mudson. But even beyond the defiance, there's also a genuine care for them. The super interesting dynamic of push and pull between each other. Femme fatale characters are about the threat femininity poses to masculinity. But this movie does not treat Gilda as a threat, instead as a natural human, acting as if she feels his best. In a lot of these movies, the woman is the one to blame for what went wrong. This movie does not shy away from blaming her and her actions, but it does so fairly, showing both halves are to blame. I just find it so interesting how this building block of a trope and genre manages to tackle the subject with nuance, but what followed, it reduces any of what made the original portrayal work. This movie is not just amazing because of the costumes, and Rita Hayworth being gorgeous, that she flirts with men. It is so much more than that. I haven't touched on the musical numbers, but I enjoyed them. You see the seeds being planted for what would come in the 50s with their musicals like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Funny Face, and American in Paris. Particularly the Marilyn Monroe movies. Gilda felt like a test drive, one that made for great scenes. I will say something brings this movie down. The first 30 minutes or so were dreadfully boring. It was all about Johnny and his rigged dice and gambling. It wasn't until Gilda came in that things started to be interesting. But once the movie got started, it found its groove and settled into a pretty good movie, while never fully recovering from the start. Also, why the hell did they have to show you Mudson surviving the plane crash? It would have been so much better if they just didn't and kept it a surprise for his return later. This category was to pick from a list of all-time closet picks. A Letterboxd user has compiled a list of what has been picked out the most in the closet pick videos. It felt natural to just pick the highest one, with 32 people selecting it that was a woman under the influence. Such people like Robert Downey Jr., Judd Apatow, Winona Ryder all picked this. If the movie's good enough for Hollywood's best, it would be good enough for me, right? This movie is about Mabel, a stay-at-home mom and housewife. She's incredibly lonely due to her distant husband and lack of friends. She grows more unstable, not being able to find any fulfillment. It was painful to watch this person slowly break down. She is abused and pushed around to the point of breaking, being put in a hospital, which doesn't treat her right. She gets out and Nick, her husband, doesn't have a sympathetic bone in his body. Final scene involves some self-harm and parental arguing, then they all go to bed like this is just normal. This movie was a miserable watch. I cut it into 3 different viewings just because it made me uncomfortable. I just couldn't sit through it without wanting to stop experiencing what I felt. So I had to stop and walk a lap around the house, play with the dogs. I just failed to see the point of the misery. Creatives often joke around that depression creates good art, and it can if you do it carefully. But dwelling in the negative just feels like a cheat code to get people to feel anything at all. It's easy to make people feel the negativity this movie puts off. It is easy to make me see shreds of my own experience in this. Not fully, but I can see myself in some of these hyper-specific parts of this. I just want more. If you're going to make your movie this hard to watch, there needs to be a pot of gold at the end of the world's saddest rainbow. But for me, the pot is just full of fool's gold. What the movie does have is the technical craft. The filmmaking is undeniable, cinematography and editing are great, but the main dish is Gina Rowlands as Mabel, acting her ass off without ever coming off as tryhard. It was a truly fascinating performance and pushing yourself into a territory that should be hard to go, but I just don't find it worth it. I think that comes down to this movie not being for me. Category 30 is one of my favorites on the list, to watch a movie never taken in the closet pick videos. 400 people have entered the closet and not chosen this set of movies. Time to give attention to the underappreciated gems in Criterion's catalog. While looking through the list, there was one clear choice for me, the Heroic Trio 2 Executioners. It is fun to talk about a sequel in the same video I talked about the original in. I hadn't watched the first when I chose this list, but I am of course very excited for this movie if it is anything like its precursor. Executioners takes place sometime after the first, when the world has been ripped apart by war, social and political strife. A post-apocalyptic film where clean water is a scarcity and the trio have to try and stop the bad guys. The 2 main factions are the government, who's trying their best and failing, and a gang, I think, led by this evil dude who's plotting to kill the president and take his spot while seizing power and controlling all the water. I don't want to compare this movie to the first one, it feels unfair. I'm going to try and get the comparisons out of the way, and then I can probably talk about this movie on its own. Executioners is a letdown next to the original. No simpler way of putting that. What hurts this movie is the lack of focus on the trio. They hardly interact in this, which was some of the best parts of the first. Instead, they each had their own storyline that happened vaguely near each other. The scene of them fighting each other felt like we were so bad. It was the energy I missed. So much of the plot is focused on the revolution and president, taking focus off the trio. The main villain is not nearly as cool, and there's a lot more gunfighting in this, which decreases the amount of actual fistfighting. It was still a good movie. The hyper awesome set pieces weren't gone, the brief fight with the 3, the train scene, and the swimming scenes were all great. The movie still has the ability to go big and hit action that rules. Wonder Woman's return is the type of action I wanted. This movie hit some of the action highs, but they were fewer and far in between, making it just a great movie. What a dumb criticism to level at something, that it was only great. I like 2/3 of the story progression in this, starting off with Maggie Cheung's Thief Catcher. It has been 10 movies without her, which felt wrong. Glad to see her back. I really like where this character went. In the first, she was reckless, the little sister, but in this movie she realizes she can't be that. At the start, stepping into the reluctant aunt role. Later, realizing she needs to step up and take some responsibility for both her niece and her sister. Realizing her youngish, selfish mind wasn't what she needed or wanted. Maggie played into it with a little bit more maturity and emotion emotional than the first. Her performance wasn't completely different, but it changed enough to be felt. I also liked Michelle Yeoh's Invisible Girl here. In the first, she was one of the bad guys, kidnapping babies for evil cult sacrifices. In this movie, she's the complete opposite, obsessed with doing everything she can to make the world a better place, trying to prove she is reformed by causing as much good as humanly possible. She also had a goon with her, just a weird little freak that went unexplained. He was funny. But then there's Anita Moy's Wonder Woman, who I felt was treated pretty poorly by this movie. One of my favorite elements with the first was the commentary on gender roles and androgyny that Wonder Woman really portrayed. But in this movie, she stepped down from being Wonder Woman for the first 75% to be a mother and wife. This character would have never stepped back or made that promise. She was the one who saved people and knew it. Letting her husband drive a lot of the choices and be the active one was a misstep, taking her out of a large portion of the film, tying her down to motherhood over being a hero. It just goes against the best parts of the first and was a mistake. I wanted the heroic trio to be themselves, not have the coolest ones sit on the sidelines, especially since it trampled over the theme and character development. The one benefit to sidelining her was to make the eventual return all that much cooler. Her raising the mask and casting a shadow after spending the whole movie repressing that part of her hit like crack. But I'm unsure if the trade-off was worth it. It would have been badass anyway. The OG was released February 12, 1993. Later in the year, Johnny To directed and released The Barefoot Kid and The Mad Monk. Then, on September 30th, 1993, he released this movie, so it came at the end of his busiest year. I think that is why this one feels a little underbaked. He threw it together to release because he could, I guess. I wish he had sat on it and fully developed it a little bit longer. The vibe, a dark fantasy apocalypse, is great. I like the world, even if it did deviate from the first. This one never really stood a chance. I loved that first movie so much, but a 4-star movie will always look like a disappointment next to peak movie making, but is worth celebrating the good qualities of a 4-star like Exactioners. A sequel to a movie you love could be so much worse than this one is. We've moved through every decade available, so we have to move on to a new archetype category every few picks. This one is continents. We are starting with good old North America. There are only a few countries for this one. Panama, Jamaica, and other countries don't have any films in the collection. I've just realized that Guatemala has 2 films and it's in North America. I should have picked one of those, but I originally went with the boring American option of David Cronenberg's Videodrome. Then I added the Shrouds to this list because I hate myself, so I swapped Videodrome with Anatomy of a Murder. I also love Anatomy of a Fall, so I was excited to see how the 2 courtroom dramas compared. Trigger warning, mentions of rape. It is not shown but discussed. Timestamp on screen and in the description. Frederick Manny Manison was arrested for the murder of Barney. Manny does not deny the actions of the murder and enlists Paul Baker to be his lawyer, a former DA. Manny claims he has no memory of the murder, but he did it because Barney raped his wife. Paul is hoping for a defense of temporary insanity with Manny's stellar track record in the military and motive. The prosecutors are a team of 2 highly experienced and skilled attorneys whose resumes outpunch Paul's, Mitch Lodwick and Claude Dancer. The legal battle is tough and dirty, Paul having to fight hard and smart to get his points across without being reprimanded for breaking decorum. Helping Paul is his friend and drunk, Parnell McCarthy. 2 different psychiatrists have opinions that are conflicting about whether Manny's state of mind. His wife Laura is dragged into this, being called a flirt, the implication being it was consensual. She was forced to recount her trauma in the courtroom. There's a secret daughter that ends up being the smoking gun and proving the rape, getting Manny off free. Overall, I found myself drawn to courtroom dramas, Anatomy of a Fall being the big one, A Few Good Men, Kramer vs. Kramer, all movies I love. I watched the movie 1776 in a class in high school, and while not strictly a courtroom drama, it had the same DNA. My mom watches a lot of Law & Order SVU, and spent months watching it from the start, so whenever I was in the living room, I would be watching it, and I low-key really enjoyed it. My favorite of her shows. There's something I find so watchable and engaging about back and forth that comes with courtrooms. This movie might be a little long to set it up, but I don't care. This movie's brilliant. Masterpiece is a word I hesitate to throw around, but this movie earned it. So delicately threaded together, equally engaging, emotional, and meaningful. Executed to technical perfection, exactly what a movie should be. To start, the jazz score under this movie is everything to me. I love jazz in general. Brought by Inji is a modern popish jazz song and my favorite song ever. But put that under a movie and I am obsessed. It just hits the ears and makes the brain happy. But it has a thematic meaning to the movie. Jazz mirrors courtrooms, the free flow nature, and how there are no rules. The movie knows a courtroom isn't some serious place where rules are followed. It is a show and a game. You have to just be better about winning that game. My favorite part of the movie is when Paul pushes the boundaries and the judge tells the jury to strike that question from their thoughts. Manson asks, "How is that possible?" And Paul says, "It's not. You just have to get away with breaking the rules." It shows just how absurd our legal system is, how any given legal battle comes down to who can bend and break the rules in the right way. In this movie, Paul is constantly playing a game of chicken. If he plays it straight down the road, he will lose. But if he pushes too far too fast, he will be thrown out by the judge. The movie presents a brilliant balance of what Paul had to do, and it had you rooting for him even if the verdict really should go the other way. Walking into a bar and shooting a man dead should put you in jail even if you think he deserved it. The social judgment system can understand and sympathize with why this was done, but this defense shouldn't work in a justice system, even if he was temporarily insane. But the movie knows that and plays into it. You wanting him to get off free, and getting it shows one of the many failures of the justice system. The movie is able to appeal to the side of understanding the why, as reason enough to not be punished. It shows you that the system is set up poorly, how women are treated and not believed. The system would have never found justice for Laura's rape. The way she's harassed in this movie, the thing she's called, proved to me that no punishment would have come if Manny wasn't the one bringing it. Laura's entire character in this movie is so tragic. She was used as a pawn in so many other people's games. I felt so deeply for how she was being treated, shedding tears at just how painful this was for her. The prosecutor, the daughter, Manny and Paul, the judges, the tabloids, everyone was using her to get what they wanted. Manny and Paul being the most sympathetic and using her for what is seemingly good. But she shouldn't have to be put through such a painful and public process to get justice. She shouldn't have to rely on her husband to get justice. This is what the overall hypothesis comes down to. Our justice system is fucked at every stage, so you should cheer for the murderer to win. And I fully bought in. However, through all this grimy, fake legal world, there is Parnell McCarthy, the drunk assistant to Paul. He was inspired through this case to clean up his act and help Paul with more cases like this, to fight back against the system, giving a mission statement that hope prevails through all the grime. There are some individuals that do care and are in this for the right reason. Makes it more than just a bummer about how depressing the reality of the world we live in and elevates it that much more. I had a phenomenal time with this movie and loved it more than I really thought I was going to. Back to another closet picks category, this time from Ayo Edebiri, an actor I generally like but haven't been blown away by anything yet. I know she has a phenomenal performance brewing in her, I just need to see it. Maybe that's the bear, but I'm not a huge TV watcher. My favorite thing of hers is this podcast clip where a friend says she's nowhere near as talented as Mr. Bean. Her reaction is hilarious, and I want more of that natural chemistry in her movies. But on to her picks. She has Audrey Hepburn's Charade on her list. That movie rules. She also unfortunately has 2 Wes Anderson movies I refuse to watch. I ended up going with To Sleep with Anger. So get ready for a dumbass white boy to talk about a movie dealing with race. This movie is about Harry, a southerner who surprises 2 old friends with a visit, and they offer to let Harry stay with them and their family. The couple spends most of their days watching their grandson. Harry is charming, but disarms the family, bringing up wounds. His presence causes chaos in a hostile environment. To Sleep with Anger felt like it was building to some big conclusion, some statement piece at the end telling you what it all meant. Then it ended on a subtle note, never giving that. My review at the time of watching this was, I assume it will come to me with time, and I'll be able to return and write more. Well, it has not come with time. I am still clueless about the conclusion the movie draws. I know it's about a complicated man and general problems facing black communities in America. Hey, you can't show the anger you are 100% justified in having because you will be labeled as the bad guy for being angry. But that's it. The movie is purposefully ambiguous in its theme, and I'm not the type of person who could sit down and dissect it for everything it is trying to say. There's definitely stuff here that I know I would like to understand more, so maybe a rewatch would kind of reveal that kind of stuff. An example of me not knowing enough to break down the movie is the idea of old Southern values. It seems that Harry being Southern means something about who he is, and coming to Los Angeles is different and he's entering a different world. But I don't know exactly what that all means and how it plays out. Danny Glover is operating on another level, a man regretting his life, lashing out, trying to get a reaction from the family he stays with, grasping for control. A highlight for lead performances in this project. It actually has me wondering if I should do an award show for these 52 movies. If you would be interested in that, let me know. Danny would for sure be a front runner for his category. Towards the end of the movie, tensions are high and Harry tries to tell a joke about some guy going to hell, but it gets cut off. It isn't funny to joke about hell and the characters are fed up with him at that point. I was disappointed. I wanted to hear his joke. Why are they just gonna tease me with this joke setup and not actually pay it off? What I did get from this movie I enjoyed. The family drama was the right level of uncomfortable. Hell, the whole movie made me uncomfortable enough to physically feel it without going overboard. Using the comedy to distract and make the destruction of the family palatable, I think there is treasure in this movie. I would encourage others to watch it even if I didn't vibe with it all the way. back to another adventure in filmmaking, this time with Wim Wenders, a name I somehow didn't recognize despite seeing 2 of his movies, Perfect Days and Paris, Texas. 2 movies I should really know who directed. I liked Perfect Days and didn't get the Paris, Texas hype. But there's one more movie I have now seen. He directed Pina from earlier on in the video. One of the movies I have liked the least, but hey, that doesn't matter. I chose to go for the artsy poetry movie Heart of a Dog for some reason. This is an odd one. Laurie Anderson was the creative behind it all. She made this album-like thing where all the tracks had some mix of music, lyrics, and slam poetry, all about her remembering and honoring her dog Lolabelle. The visuals are a mix of some animated parts and dreamy visuals, live-action footy filmed shakily. If I didn't understand King Lear or Pina, I really didn't understand Heart of a Dog. I'm sure there's some artistry in here, but it was just a vast sea of babble to me. But I understand poetry even less than dance, so I don't know if there was any world in which I really got this movie and connected with it. There was a part I found way funnier than I should have. She was talking about how she had only seen this look one time before, in her newborn eyes after 9/11. We go from talking about a dog to Bin Laden in the space of about 3 seconds. This, much like Wim Wenders' Paris, Texas, is just not for me. Back to the continents, moving southbound with South America. Another movie that was on the list last year and came back, Pixote. Trigger warning, murder, rape, pedophilia, times on the screen. A bunch of kids, including 10-year-old Pixote, are rounded up and thrown in Sao Paulo prison. While there, they are constantly under the threat of the guards and other inmates, beating and sexual assault all normal. After the police murder 2 boys, Pixote and his friends flee. Chico is kinda just there. Then there is trans woman Lilica and leader of the group Ditto. The 4 of them get close, having nowhere else to go and having to rely on each other. They end up bouncing from place to place, being exploited through drug trade and sexually. Chico is killed while the other 3 find work with a pimp. Lilica leaves, saddened by Ditto's new level. Pixote and Ditto try to rob a guy, but Pixote ends up killing Ditto. He is left alone, but wanders through the train tracks in the morning. I was a little hesitant and scared to put this on the list and watch it. Everything I've heard about this movie online is just how bleak and depressing it is. I thought I was going to watch some kind of snuff film. Don't get me wrong, this movie definitely goes dark. Murder, drug use, child exploitation, and rape are not light, but it never becomes voyeuristic or torture-porn. The film isn't in the business of enjoying and reveling in the character's suffering, but instead observing and giving Pixote sympathy. It has the magic touch that some movies have. No other art form can elicit the pure emotions of a movie, and this is a prime example. A line that is hard to walk, but nailing it as well as they do makes it shine. The movie deals with some tougher material than Woman Under the Influence, but manages to make it more palatable. This is another movie about exploitation of power within prison and political systems, this time focusing on how Brazilian youth are set up to fail, living in horrid conditions, forced to turn to whatever scrap they can get. Look at the choice they had here in this movie. Stay in prison, be tortured by power-hungry guards, or leave and gain some freedom, but still be at the whims of what adult wants to use them next. The movie is angry at the position kids are put into. A real one kids are put into. Parents are left behind by the system, causing them to abandon their children. I feel these themes just by watching the movie, but making it hit so much harder is the details surrounding the real-life death of lead actor Fernando Ramos da Silva. At 19, he was shot by 3 police officers who claimed he fired first, and it was a shootout. His sister claimed he was unarmed, merely fleeing from the police. Forensic science came out to show that he was shot when he was laid down flat. Fernando was executed on the spot by police officers just because they could. Tying the corruption of the real world in with my feelings about this, it makes what I saw here feel all the more real. Upon reading that story, my first thought was how horrible and tragic it is. But my second was, Pixote foretold these circumstances. I can't imagine having accidentally foretold that that person's fate would be that way. But that is far from the only theme I took away from this. The found family aspect is maybe even stronger. The kids are so young that you feel their vulnerability and the trust they put into each other, the lengths they go for each other. Ditto tries his hardest to protect the others, taking them to the beach for a day, trying to give Pixote moments of childlike wonder. Lilica feeling safe around the others, a remarkably nuanced trans character for the time. She's accepted by the boys in the group and feels comfortable with them. But she's forced to leave, knowing if she gets caught for a crime when she turns 18, she will be killed in prison. The breaking apart of the group hurt so bad. Found family crumbling moves me, and had me crying through so much of this. Even after everything Pixote goes through, he still has a childlike hope. All the pain falls to the wayside. His friends have died or left. Truly, he has nobody left, rejected by adults and the government. But he walks down those train tracks, whistling and holding his gun. It was both inspiring and the saddest thing in the entire movie. First off, if even he can look up after this, then hope is always possible. However, the thing that makes this the saddest part is that it feels normal to him. In some respect, he expected this to happen. It didn't shatter his world. He has seen this happen to others, and it happened to people in real life. Countless children have gone through similar events and never had the space to recognize just how traumatic what they go through is. As with so many of these movies, the performances were top notch. I am normally so anti-child acting. They are all bad at it. But I did not have a problem with this movie. The movie felt so much like a documentary throughout. Shots lingered and had you observing from a distance, making it feel that much more real. Meaning the kids' acting didn't need to be fully polished to shine through and have an impact on me. There was such a real feeling to this movie. It presented a real horrifying culture. It is heavy. Watch it for yourself if you're okay with movies that make you feel bad. But it is one of those movies that I think about all the time now, and had enough throughout to keep me going. The type of movie I think people studying film should study. The way this movie makes the audience feel emotions is masterful and what all movies should be trying to do. Another really fun category here. Pull up a random number generator, put in the highest spine number, and leave that sucker to RNG. Whichever movie it lands on, you watch. Although, I cheated here. This was a category last year, and I pulled a Godzilla movie. So I just brought back the roll from last year. Back-to-back redemption rounds. Hopefully this one isn't as sad. Big Egg shows up. Gets sold to greedy businessman. Scientist professor wants it to protect it. Reporter and camera woman want to help keep the egg away from businessman legally. These tiny fairies, the Shobijin, show up and tell everyone the egg belongs to them, that the typhoon caused it to wash away, and if it cracks, Mothra's baby will come out and kill all of them. The good guys agree to try and help them. Here comes the big bad guy himself. Godzilla just shows up and starts killing people. The trio of good guys go to the Shobojin and ask for help from Mothra. They're hesitant to, having been affected by Japan's nuclear testing, but ultimately agree to. Mothra spends her dying moments fighting Godzilla and helping the babies hatch, who fight off Godzilla as the people flee to safety. I watched this movie the same day as Pixote, which was a morning watch, so I wound the evening down by watching this one. I've never had such a dramatic tone shift between two movies. This movie is very silly, almost cartoon levels, of a superficially greedy businessman in here. He would have fit at home in a Scooby-Doo movie, so it was a nice refresher, but took some time to get used to. The tone of this is what made it. Are all these old Godzilla films in this era whimsical, silly, and vibrant? Because if so, I might have to check out more of these. I do feel that this is just a shiny new toy, and if I watch more, the novelty will wear off, but I'm still in the honeymoon period, so fuck it, I like this one a lot. I don't think much of this movie was exceptional. Instead, it was just all really good. A fun, engaging story that did enough to keep me engaged throughout the runtime of the film. I enjoyed the photographer as a character the most, how willing she was to commit to change for the better. She understands the Shobojin's hesitancy to help, and was the key in convincing them. The action was fun, not the best, it looked a little sloppy at points, but who can hate on these big monsters fighting and the giant laser beams this dude's shooting off? The action was as impressive and clean as it needed to be, and once again, I just like the Godzilla dude shooting lasers. It's fun. In my notes, I wrote, "The power of attorney line is the funniest thing I've heard in a while." Normally when I write a note like this, I will put the joke down, or at least a timestamp, but nope. So I don't remember what this one specific joke is half a year later, but this movie apparently had one of the funniest things I had heard in a while. I love watching and talking about good movies. For a period there, writing this movie felt like pulling teeth. It was hard to get anything done. It's hard to put things out about movies I just don't really care about. But movies that I enjoyed, it is so easy to write about, reinforcing my desire to just talk about the movies I like, but I do know there needs to be some balance. Love that this was the movie that the random dice gods gave me. This category is to pick from a list of movies made by AAPI filmmakers, Asian American or Pacific Islanders. I went with Takeout, co-directed, written, and produced by Taiwanese filmmaker Ching Chow. This movie was co-directed by close collaborator Sean Baker, and she has her first solo project coming out this year in terms of directing, Left-Handed Girl, being submitted by Taiwan to the Academy Awards this year, which is my third favorite movie of the year. Actually, fourth favorite. Ming is an undocumented immigrant from China who owes loan sharks. He has to make up $800 in one night while working delivery for Chinese takeout shops in New York. He borrows most of the money, but is still short by around double his daily take home from tips. His friend gave Ming all the deliveries for the night, and Ming manages to get the money but is robbed. Another friend sees what is happening and offers help since he was in this position once as well. Takeout is really good for the movie it's trying to be. I mean that in the most complimentary way possible. It knows it is a rather small movie, containing mostly scenes of Ming delivering the food and waiting around. It doesn't try too much. Put the focus on being an immigrant and New York. I was also impressed at just how stressful this movie is while keeping the pace slower. The scenes of him delivering aren't pumped up with high energy music, him speeding. They just let you sit in the uncomfortableness and dread of the situation. It is easy to make people stressed out using cinematography and score, but it is not that easy to do so purely based on the script and main actor. And oh boy, Charles Zhang was amazing in this. Ming is in pure survival mode throughout, having to hold it together. And Charles shows that stress and frustration. You always feel like he's on the verge of a breakdown, trying to put on a face for more tips, but unable to. I am not an actor and don't understand the mechanisms behind it, but how do you act like a sad person trying to be happy without just going happy? This movie also made me so hungry, man. Unfairly hungry. They went to real Chinese takeout shops and filmed the food during peak hours. I wanted to get up and eat a big meal the entire time, go order some food. It is cruel to make food look this good on film. I was a little worried when I picked this. Choosing to watch a movie co-directed by a white guy for the AAPI category felt dumb. But this movie stands out. So brought so much of herself into this movie. First off, it has some similarities stylistically to Left-Handed Girl, and of course the focus on food in both her movies. Her voice is arguably more present than Baker for this. Most of all, I love how the entire movie was in Mandarin. I feel like it would have been easy to have this in English so it's more accessible, but they didn't bother and kept what the heart of the movie is, making me feel even more sure and being okay to pick this for the category. After all this praise, I will say the movie isn't everything. It is low budget, but they maximize what they have, and that's important. I rated this 3 stars, and in retrospect, that feels a little harsh. It definitely did it enough to bump it up to at least a high 3.5. Give this movie a go, and also watch Left-Handed Girl, which is one of the year's best. I love that movie. The task this time was to watch a movie under 80 minutes. No clue why the number wasn't 90, but anyway, I was looking through and saw the Beastie Boys video anthology. I picked it because it sounded cool. I was unable to find this movie on the internet at all though. Not on any of the streaming services, not even Criterion themselves, none of the sites out there, not on the Internet Archive. I guess I could have paid $20 pre-shipping for the hard copy, but like, no. So I was forced to change it. Can someone who has the physical copy just like rip that shit? My email is in the description, dawson.make@gmail.com. I would still really like to watch that one, but instead I went with Kelly Reichardt's debut, Old Joy. Mark used to be a free spirit kind of guy, but has settled down and is expecting his first child. His old friend Kurt, who is still a hippie, calls and invites Mark on a camping trip and he accepts, looking for a break from the stress of the world. The two go off on their trip and lament about times gone by, the state of their friendship, and discuss the two paths life has taken them each down. Mark misses his old life, thinking about the old ideals he had. They end the trip as awkwardly as they started, and Mark goes back to his boring ass life. Old Joy is only my second Reichardt movie after Showing Up, which is a movie I didn't love. I see many people online heaping praises onto a film, while saying they are challenging and slow watches that will alienate some viewers. After not connecting with Showing Up, I was worried I was one of the slow movie haters people talked about. And then came Old Joy, which never moved past middling for me. I had a crisis. I thought I was okay with slow movies. Am I not? Then I realized I connected with Takeout, a slow burn movie which has a lot of the same DNA Old Joy does, so it's not just the pace. I can like a slow movie. There's something else in their filmography that is blocking me from enjoying it right now. What I did take away from this movie had to deal with the central theme around trying to reboot old friendships. You hold the memories of your old friends so dearly, but then time passes and you both become different people. The reunion is so different from what you two used to be like. It hurts to realize that you lost that person, and a piece of yourself. Mark isn't just grieving over the friendship he used to have, but grieving over his old self. He realized he once stood for something and believed in a better purpose in life, wishing he could drop everything he built to go back to that, but he was unable to. I just wish this movie focused on that internal struggle a little more than it did. The movie left my mind wondering to fill in some of the blanks during the downtimes. I felt like it was more concerned with showing us some pretty woods and imagery than the emotional through line they had set up here. And the imagery was good looking, but not enough to fully sustain the movie on its own. I think the movie got that balance slightly wrong. Time for everyone's favorite continent, a movie from Europe. And I went full art house with the Bergman movie, choosing Persona. Okay, so this is my third Bergman movie. After strongly disliking Wild Strawberries and finding Through the Glass Darkly to be fine, I went into this movie wanting to find the light. I want to know what makes him so great, but I also considered this one final test for Bergman, and it failed that test. I don't get it on any level. I do not understand this movie. Like, I think both of these people are Alma, but I don't know. I guess I had a fine time overall. It held my attention attention long enough to keep me with it for the 84 minutes runtime, but that was just it. I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but the filmmaking is good here. Of course, it is Bergman knows what he's doing behind the camera, but it just isn't enough for me, and there's nothing to latch onto. After this, I think I'm going to take a long break from Bergman movies. There are so many directors whose filmography I'm interested in exploring, new directors I want to watch. I need to stop watching these for now. I'm sure I'll eventually return to this filmography and maybe find what makes it special, but for now, I'm out. This category was to pick a movie from a list titled Cult Classics on Criterion's website. I was a little surprised to see Valley of the Dolls on this list because it's one of those movies with such a bad reputation. I've never heard anything good about it, but seeing it there made me think there was something to like. I wanted to watch it, so I did. Trigger warning: suicide and drug use. Valley of the Dolls spans 2 decades, following 3 different women in their careers. Young grad Ann Wells, played by Barbara Parkins, who breaks into the industry young by starting a tumultuous relationship with a producer, mostly doing commercial work. There was also Neely O'Hara, played by Patty Duke, who gets catapulted into stardom after one nightclub performance and moves to Hollywood, also getting in several bumpy relationships along the way. Finally, there is Sharon Tate's Jennifer North, who is less talented than the other two, but is beautiful. She is used for her looks throughout the industry. All 3 women struggle with the pressure put on women, what they have to do to make it. They turn to a drug called dolls, an alcohol that furthers their downfall. Anne quits the industry and moves to England. Neely never quite manages to quit the drug and is abandoned by the industry and the people in her life, leaving her a mess. Then Jennifer kills herself, fearing her only value is in her body, which she believes that value will go down after she is diagnosed with breast cancer. They stuffed a lot into this movie, which was based on the best-selling book of the same name. I think a lot of the big ideas work on the surface level but are not fully explored. The pacing is a mess, causing the movie to suffer. The characters go from on top and living the high life to desperately addicted back to recovery in such a small amount. The one specific moment is when Neely goes from total addiction, almost dying on a beach, to recovery in the very next shot. Then she was back on the drugs, getting kicked off shows as well, pretty quickly. It was a joke just how fast this movie moved at points, while meandering in others. I did really enjoy the slower moments of the girls just existing, so I wouldn't want to cut those. Just add 30 minutes to flesh this out a little bit more. This movie has some real world parallels and exists in a spot in time. As a lover of Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, this was a fun watch. In Valley of the Dolls, Sharon Tate plays a character who's remembered for her early death, looks, and famous husband. Shortly after this movie, she would die early and is mostly remembered for her beauty and husband. Scary stuff, but Sharon and all the women brought more to this than their looks. While not the traditional kinds of acting, it was unique, going big and melodramatic for the emotional scenes. Makes this movie stand out as its own thing. Then, as I said, I love the quieter moments of this and the interactions between them all. This movie exists within so many contradictions, it's kinda crazy. The book was about how women are forced to bend and break themselves to be accepted by the establishment. How much the group of people behind Hollywood suck, but the writer of the book wrote it to be accepted by the very establishment she criticized. It goes back to the idea that Hollywood is a jester, able to eat itself up and criticize itself as long as you make money off of it. Then for a movie warning against the way women are treated in Hollywood, the women were treated awfully on the set of this. Patty Duke has talked about the way director Mark Robson treated the actors, the cruelty he used targeting Tate the most. He would yell, get aggressive, order the women to set hours early. By all accounts, the set was a rough place to be when Robson was around. The main 3 women, though, bonded and became friends. Parkins and Duke were invited to Tate's house the night she was murdered but just couldn't go. At least there was this camaraderie between the women to lighten it up on set. So as you can see, this movie was low-key a mess, based on a gossipy book that the publishing house had members begging not to publish, given to Hollywood, who then changed the meaning and a lot of the members stopped caring about it. It became a job to just get done to many, and others who wanted it to be good lacked the talent to do so. While I enjoyed it for the colorful sets, snappy editing, costumes, and performances, the script lacked the juice. Others didn't see the value in it I did. So how did a movie that was as panned as this on release become the cult classic it is? At some point, people had to start to like it. Like a lot of cult classics and cornerstones of culture, this movie's resurgence has its root in queer drag/ballroom culture of the 80s. Drag queens would take on these past visions of pure femininity and put them on in shows, use the image as a way to express themselves, able to see past the wonky side of the movie to see 2 different sides. The passive but present takedown of patriarchy and normalcy, while just being fun. These 2 sides are why people latched onto this type of thing. Even if the melodrama is historically considered over the top, these people embraced that side of it. It was the queer community that rewatched and held this movie so highly and gave it the reputation of actually being good, something super conservative director Mark Robson probably hated. I have zero evidence, this is just me thinking out loud, but I wonder if this movie had anything to do with the emergence of the term dolls referring to trans women, term that some trans women don't like, but it's widely used. I was wondering about the origin of the term, and it seems to be be agreed that it came about in queer people of color ballroom culture during the 80s, the same time this movie got its cult classic status. I've seen no writing out there that links the two, but I could see this movie being one of the reasons the term dolls was coined. Not the sole reason, but I wonder if I could look deeper and find any evidence for this hypothesis. I watched this movie back in early June, then shortly after that I visited a friend that included an all-day car ride. We got to talking about movies I watched recently and I talked about this one. Then later he got the aux and decided to play the album I Want to Meet Richard Dreyfuss. A line came up about his brief so-called cameo in this movie. We popped off. It was a callback to our earlier conversation. Shout out to the man, the myth, the legend, Richard Dreyfuss. He's hardly in this movie, but he killed that role. Tommy Lee Jones could never do as good. Valley of the Dolls is one of the most fascinating movies I have talked about or watched, and I haven't even touched on the author of the books or dived into the Manson murders, where this movie sits in the drug panic from white people, but I really enjoyed it. For the big 40th category, we have another adventure in moviegoing, this time with Isabella Rossellini. I'm not the most familiar with her work, having only seen Conclave. Out of her options, I chose to watch a Charlie Chaplin production with the Circus. I have enjoyed Chaplin's other stuff I have seen, so hopefully this one is good too. The main character of the movie is the tramp. He wanders into a circus performance and becomes the star. He gets hired. He isn't purposefully funny, but stumbles into it. Goes from being paid pennies to getting his worth thanks to his friend he is in love with, Myrna. Myrna finds a husband and wants the three of them to stay in the circus. The tramp says he is coming, but just stays behind. This wasn't the first time I watched some of this movie. We sat down and watched like 20 minutes of it one year in high school for my film productions class, so the start felt very familiar. Then of course so much of this movie is iconic. The lion scene, tightrope walking, mirror maze, all classic bits that have been reproduced throughout time. You could definitely argue this was the basis for a lot of Looney Tunes or similar cartoons that came out later, which is when I think silent movies are at their best. Here is a silent movie that I actually really enjoyed, a straightforward story where you can communicate with relatively few title cards, relying on the actor's physicality to tell that story. Of course, that means this isn't some revolutionary story or movie. It did what they were capable of making at the time, a funny, charming, solid time. I have very few complaints about this movie and think this is the perfect representative for this era of filmmaking, and the best from the time I have seen. I do find this movie's spot in history very interesting. They were churning out movies around this time. Sometimes a director would do 3, 4, 5 in any given year, but this movie took a while. Starting in January and ending in November was filming. Some scratches to the negatives made the editing time consuming. Then the studio caught on fire, delaying it even further. But they sat on the movie for another year and 2 months because of Chaplin's divorce. So it started production in early 1926, came out in early 1928. But The Jazz Singer, the first Sound movie, came out a couple months before it, putting it in this weird spot. Made before but released after Sound was introduced, and makes it one of the last of its kind, further solidifying its spot as a great representative for this era of filmmaking. I was just charmed by this and found it funny. If you don't find it funny, I imagine you would get way less mileage with this one than I did. Respect to Isabella Rossellini for knowing ball and putting me on to this little known indie movie. Time for another closet picks, this time Winona Ryder, who I do have a decent relationship with. Mr. Deeds was one of my first favorite movies. I love her in Bram Stoker's Dracula. I had only seen one of her picks, so I had a pretty open field and went with one that gets picked all the time, Killing of a Chinese Bookie. Main character Cosmo is a funny dude, man. He owns a strip club but tries to be all artistic about it, like spending time choreographing and designing shows. Man, people are just there to see naked women, it isn't all that serious. He gets in deep gambling debt and is offered 2 ways out: sign over ownership of the club or kill a bookie. I'll let you guess about that bookie's race. Cosmo goes on a mission, but whoopsie, he was tricked. It wasn't just some bookie, but a high-level member of the mafia. This dude had fucked, but he goes back to his club. I didn't realize this when I picked, but The Killing of the Chinese Bookie is the second movie from John Cassavetes on this list, the first being A Woman Under the Influence, but this is the better of his too. The movie flopped hard upon release, and John blamed the hasty edit, redid it and re-released the movie with a shorter runtime and some of the fluff caught off. I watched the OG cut though. First off, I wanted to talk about the ending of this movie. At first, I thought it came pretty suddenly. He escapes the debt, but now has an even bigger threat of the Chinese mafia coming for him. The end is just him walking out of his club and standing on the sidewalk. But with some time, it made sense. Cosmo knew he was a dead man walking. We know this too, and the movie set that up. He went into the club and confessed how he thinks his life went, just like the guy he killed did. Cosmo had pushed the women he loved away. He gives one last start to this show and just accepts his fate. I think this works well because the movie is just Cosmo, like one of the most singular focused character studies I have seen. scene. The way the camera focuses on him for a long period of time, everything is centered around him and never gives you his perspective. So we don't need to see him die, but instead stop putting on the face he has. His speech spells out what the movie was trying to get the audience to see, that he's an insecure man who wants others to appreciate him. This is why he wants more from the club than just to make money. He wants to be appreciated beyond his current life. I also love his obsession with the club. It's his baby and mirrors how real filmmakers are. John is no stranger to this either, wanting total control over the movie and meticulously redoing scenes until it's just the way he wants. He just can't give up his baby and what he sees. Neither can Cosmos or John. I do normally really connect with directors having this self-realization and grappling with their own personality in movies, but it didn't land quite as hard here, and I think the reason is that I don't have a connection with him as a filmmaker or his filmography. The one other movie I've seen was a painful watch I got nothing from, so while I acknowledge what he is doing, I see it. I can't fully connect with it the way some others could. Rather than being blown away, it just made me nod my head. There is more here than what I've talked about. My favorite scene was when Cosmo was trying to get home after the murder. He was frantically moving around the city. He was doing it all when he was shot too, but he just goes from one vehicle to another. He would grab a cab for a little bit, then hop on a bus, back to a cab, then a different cab, never giving full addresses. It made the escape feel all that realer. He was trying to get away and be undetectable, and Cassavetes adds to the chaos by not giving a fuck about traditional filmmaking. The cinematography is extra shaky and he cuts at odd points, breaking continuity in ways that most other filmmakers wouldn't dare to. Killing of a Chinese Bookie is a right step for John Cassavetes compared to Women Under the Influence. It was a pretty solid movie that did a lot I liked but not much I loved. Wish Fiona Ryder could have put me onto something that I would have loved. That would have been so epic. My African film bag is embarrassingly weak, so thankfully this category was here to help me solve that just a little bit. I need to explore more movies from Africa. It's just a little hard to find what movies I should be watching because they're so rarely discussed. But for this, I went with the colorful Touki Bouki for this challenge. Maury is a cow farmer who owns and loves a motorcycle with a born horn on it. He and his student, Anta, dream of wanting to get out of Senegal and live their dream life in Paris. They steal the money to afford it, go on the run from the police. They make it on the boat to leave, but Maury gets scared and stays behind, looking to get his motorcycle back. Who better to talk about colonialism and how it affects this movie and its style than me, some dumbass who doesn't know if what he is saying means anything, but instead just goes based on his own observation. The main themes of this seem to be you are stuck in Senegal while longing to escape, but it takes the route that you shouldn't be trying to escape. His motorcycle and the memories of were more important than leaving. It wants to celebrate its own culture while it takes so much from the French New Wave. The personal struggle story, the handhelds, jump cuts, the theming about your place in life are all New Wave-isms. So I feel like some of this movie's attempts to burst out of just being a colony are a little held back by utilizing some very French film technique. It never changed my thoughts on this movie, but I just found it to be an interesting dichotomy. But the movie didn't just copy and paste French New Wave. It had its own style, primarily with the score and its hectic nature. The music is all over the place, giving an energy past the self-contained personal story. I have read online that people say this comes down to the idea that what Senegal is. The idea that it is a hybrid place, so this movie takes that and combines style. It makes sense to me. This tackled very large themes about the place of Senegal in the world, but it did so on such a small personal scale. It made the political and social aspects far more digestible for someone as uninformed as me. The highlights were the costumes and cinematography. Like, look at these people and how they are dressed. I'm a sucker for vibrancy and this movie gave it to me, building up to the ending costumes. I need a lilac suit like that, but I wouldn't look this stunning. The colors of this just make it easier to look at and sink into. Then the cinematography is excellent, showing exactly as much as it needed to, filling the frame perfectly. I do think the movie was a little too slow at points. It worked for a solid 90% of the runtime. The slow building and existing kept me mostly engaged, but I did find myself ever so slightly checked out. I even ended up checking out how long was left in the movie one time, which isn't great for a 90-minute movie, but I was a little tired when watching this, so I can attribute it to that. Based on what I have seen, director Djibril Jap Mabeti seems really cool. During the filming of this, his first feature film, he rejected any funding from France, wanting to have full autonomy over the project. He was also arrested in Rome for protesting during the production of this movie. Like, that's based as fuck, and I will soon be watching his one other film. In this fear of ranking all these, this isn't the top of my list to be real, but I enjoyed it a lot. This is the type of movie I'm glad to have watched because of the challenge, something not on my radar that I got the push to watch because of Criterion. It has been a hot minute, but we have another director's top 10 movie list to pull from, this time with John Carpenter, who has made one of the greatest and worst horror movies of all time. This dude has a type of movie and sticks to it. A bunch of black and white noir-esque movies are on this list. I wish I had some elegant reason for why I chose Only Angels Have Wings, but I don't. Jeff Carter's flies planes for a carrier company in a small mountain-surrounded town. Bonnie Lee arrives, and Jeff and his best friend Joe start fighting for her attention. Joe dies flying that night, and Jeff and Bonnie start developing feelings, but are distant. Jeff just loves flying a little bit too much, and it's so dangerous. She wants him to stop so they can live life together, and accidentally shoots him. But it's all fine, they love each other anyway, and it's a happy ending. The first 20 minutes and last 15 minutes of this movie rule, like some great emotional and thrilling filmmaking in there. But then there are just 80-some minutes in the middle that kind of just exist. We have the build-up of Bonnie getting there, not sure which of Jeff and Joe will be the main character at that point, up until Joe crashes and burns. This is such an electrifying entry into the world and sets up the stakes and danger in it, while also giving us time to get off the first base with Bonnie. Then in the end, we have this stubborn man finally tell Bonnie how he feels about her. He doesn't say it out loud though, just hands her a double-faced coin he tossed to see if she should stay, then goes on his mission. And of course the flying itself, the part where the two go up and die towards the end being one of the highlights in terms of action. I just don't fully love how the movie connected those two parts. The middle was filled with a ton of extra stuff that dilute the story. Jeff's old flame comes back, but he never really considers her an option, only has eyes for Bonnie. There was no challenge to their relationship with the new woman. It was all the plain stuff, spending long periods of time on an old pilot who has bad vision, or the guy who everyone hated, all while the central relationship was put on the back burner. They cool off the best parts of this for random side characters that were boiled down to a single trait for some reason. It gets lost in the weeds. But the two main actors, Cary Grant and Jean Arthur, have enough chemistry to pull me through. This chemistry is electric, and I can even overlook the overly masculine vibes this movie throws out there. The emotions are all given through veiled answers, with Jeff never outright saying how he feels. He has to play the coin game with Bonnie, which she just accepts. She's totally cool not getting what she's been asking for the entire movie. It preaches the idea that masculinity is so often linked to that men can't and shouldn't express emotions. I understand the movie came out in 1939, so we hadn't really developed the idea that men are allowed to feel anything yet. This part is just a footnote, but I think it's fun to sort of look back on movies like this and talk about what's changed in the world with them. So many of these movies are just incredibly solid. The consistency across these are impressive. Not count this 5 stars, but I have a solid time with most of these movies, and Only Angels with Wing continues that. This category is simply to pick a horror movie. My process as a horror fan has largely been documented on this channel. My first video was starting my way into the genre, go check that out if you're liking this one. But for the Criterion one, I went with Dressed to Kill. Although I will say, if you want to watch a Criterion horror movie, make it House. I don't think I'll talk about the movie on the channel again, because that's the one that kind of has been copyright taken down. In the movie, woman is sad and flirts with therapist. He says no. She goes sleep with other man and is killed. Another woman sees and has to try to find the solution. The therapist gets a call from a transgender patient saying she did it because the therapist would not sign her gender change permission notes. Turns out it was the therapist the whole time, and his desire to be a woman provoked his violent nature that came out. This is my third Brian De Palma movie, first being Mission Impossible, which fucking rules. Then I covered Carrie in this channel's first video for my 13 Days of Horror that I mentioned. And now I've seen a 2-movie pattern. This dude loves to start his movie with girls showering. The opening of Carrie is her showering, but at least this movie, the woman is of age. But why did this dude feel the need to open up on a character showering? It wasn't even the main one. He just wanted an excuse to show ass. A character who only exists to serve as motivation for men in the movie. First with her son, but more so with how men react to her. Her husband hates her, her therapist sexualizes her, a random stranger gives her STDs and then she is murdered. That is all in like 10 minutes. It is not just the characters that are sexualizing her, but the movie itself. There's no sympathy for this person. The audience and director got their nude scene, and giving her little else while she was there just reinforces the idea that all she has to offer is her body and sex. It is gross and looms over the entire movie for me. So even if the rest of the movie was good, I don't think it would recover from this. Then of course we have the ill-informed misrepresentation of trans people here. I glossed over it in the explanation, but let me break down the reasoning the movie gave for the doctor to kill people. There were 2 sides to this person. He wanted to be a woman, but his man side wouldn't let that happen. So whenever he was sexually attracted to women, the woman inside of him got jealous and tried to kill them. Batshit idea. So not only is it suggesting that being trans makes you dangerous and violent, but also says women are jealous monsters. Like, it is just so stupid. But the movie explains this to you 100% seriously, doesn't drop a beat when doing it. You are expected to accept this answer and just move on, when that is not how this works. There has to be some other ways to describe this. Multiple personalities doesn't have to be tied to being trans or a queer person. They did that just because it was in style and because they could. There are some lines you have to draw when it comes to older movies and their problematic elements. A 45-year-old movie is not going to follow the norms we do now, but this movie was just filled to the brim with problematic stuff. I am unable to picture a time where this wasn't lame as shit, where devaluing women and demonizing trans people counts as entertainment. It was just exhausting. I'm also coming off of Only Angels Have Wings, a movie I criticized for overt masculinity, and that still treats women better than this movie, which came out 40 years after it. At best, this movie is contrived and ignorant. At worst, the movie is actively harmful in its treatments of women and trans characters. I don't have faith in De Palma anymore. Mr. sexualizes the 13-year-old in Carrie to go with the best case scenario. So while I could sit here and talk about the ending and how it looked and everything else, Dressed to Kill is based around a set of ideas and stereotypes I fundamentally disagree with, so I just won't talk about the good parts. There are so many movies to choose from in the Asia category. You could go with a Kurosawa, Bong Joon-ho, or other well-known director. I had a movie in the spot that I just couldn't find online, so it needed to be replaced. I considered a Hong Kong action movie because I found I loved this doing this. Then it hit me, I had to choose an Indian movie. I've seen a couple modern ones, along with the classic Awara, and I really liked them all, so I went with Monsoon Wedding for this one. Trigger warning, rape. This is another movie I am tempted to just summarize every little thing about. I love it that much, but I will try and hold back. The Verma family is planning an arranged marriage between their daughter, Aditi, and the son of another family, Hermat Rai. This calls for a massive once-in-a-generation wedding, with family members from all over coming together bringing their baggage. The main couple has reservations, including Aditi sleeping with her ex, but they come together and start to share time and enjoy each other's company. The wedding planner has a crush on and marries the family's maid. Aditi's brother plans a dance with a cousin, but the dad hates it. Then there is that dad, Lalit, a complicated figure. He has money troubles and has to ask Tej, who married into the family, for help. Lalit took in his brother's wife and daughter, Ria, after his death, providing for them. Ria is very standoffish around Tej, which blows up when she sees him trying to take the youngest sister on a car ride alone, revealing he molested her as a child. Some don't believe her, but Lalit does. He begs her to come back to the wedding, even if he can't disown Tej. Later in the day, he decides to take a stand and kick Tej out. Then, in the middle of the rain, the wedding happens and it all ends happily. For a movie called Monsoon Wedding, I really thought there would be more rain. But no, it was literally just during the wedding, so the title does remain accurate while being a little misleading. Sometimes all a movie has to do is make you feel. When I feel, I tend to like a movie a lot, and Monsoon Wedding had me feeling a lot through its entire runtime. The short review is the movie's magical because of just how it affected me emotionally. I laughed, I was frustrated, cried in sadness and happiness, had my stomach turning into knots, change into relief at the end. I felt emotionally spent at the end of this movie in the best possible way. In short, this movie is the perfect culmination of the Nicole Kidman AMC ad. This movie is the magic she was referring to. They spin so many plates, around a dozen important characters. They all have intertwined stories and moments, giving each story enough time to feel fleshed out as much as it needed to be. Aisha and her romance were only as much screen time as needed, set up her adding to the romance of it all, and she had multiple purposes, both in her romance and the dance with Varun. I did love their interactions and Aisha as a whole. Most characters are like that, playing multiple different roles in different people's story. They were all intertwined perfectly, delicately sewed together, moving and pushing on each other. None of them stand out as particularly worse than the next. This movie just has such a rhythm to it. It pushes itself forward and never makes a wrong move, balancing these stories just right, giving each of them time to shine. This comes down to a combination of the screenplay and editing. The pacing is so perfect. This movie is so full of love, both romantic and familial. It believes in a happy ending, but I will first focus on the romantic parts of this. The movie believes in the love that is out there, around every corner. I find that viewpoint so fresh and admirable. Underlining it all is that I just find rain so romantic. Like, my dream proposal is in the rain. Normally, you don't want to stay in the rain. It sucks. But there's something about being there in the downpour with the person you love that gets rid of any sensible thoughts you had before. You no longer care if you are cold or wet, that you have to change codes. Ignoring such an annoying thing for the person you love is everything to me. It doesn't matter if the weather's trying to ruin your wedding. You won't let it. So when the ending is the planner and maid getting married in the pouring rain, and Aditi having her marriage, it just puts a lovely bow on the movie I'd already been rocking with, solidifies it as romantic when I was a little hesitant on the main marriage. It being arranged and the characters unsure if they even liked each other had me sort of out of it, but then they came together and spent time with each other. Any slight tiny, insignificant problem this movie had, it shortly put a band-aid over. The scenes of everyone coming together are some of the movie's best. Just people being happy in each other's company. The pre-wedding dance scene is one of my favorites, just how warm it made me. You can feel the family tissues, how deep they care for each other, even when stressed out, worried, or fighting. The positivity that permeates most of this is lovely, but then bubbling under the movie for most of its runtime is Rhea and Tej. It is clear that Tej is grooming Aaliyah. You feel the pressure building, underlying the entire thing. This very serious conflict keeps you invested in the idea that not everything is okay. Takes it a step further than just a happy rom-com into a more emotional, deeper story. Rhea's situation is heartbreaking. She was abused in the past, but feels she has to hide it not to disturb the family's financial situation. But it bursts when she sees someone else being hurt the same way. The emotional burst at the wedding had me on the highest alert and feeling everything. Hurt so badly when she told Tej will not be kicked out. The heartbreak there is so palpable. Then to turn it around with the Lear stepping up and doing the shit he needed to, kicking Tej out and stepping up to actually protect his kids. Everything to do with Rhea is handled so well, respectfully, and never played over melodramatic. Nailed it. She was the second best character in the whole thing, and is close to that number one. That of course leads me to who I think the best character in this movie is, and that's the Lear. The journey his character goes on is the biggest. He starts the movie as this man desperate to provide for his family and protect them. He thinks he is failing because he doesn't have the money he once did. The insecurities come from the typical patriarchal ideas of having to be the breadwinner. This is where he sees his value at. Also his treatment of Varun being similar, trying to mold Varun into the more typical man and stop the dancing. But as time goes on, the Lear realizes just how flawed he is, and that money is not what these people need. He opens up and shows up for them emotionally, supporting Varun in dancing, the talk with Rhea about Tej. He opened his heart up, told her about the flaws he has as a man, and then makes them right by actually stepping up. He becomes a better dad and man by the end of this, going from not awful, but incompetent, to the pillar of the family he wishes he was, and does so by listening to their emotions. I think by the end of this movie, the Lear represents the ideal version of masculinity. He's a protector, not because women need protection, but because they deserve support, calling out other men and holding them accountable. I believe we are in a spot in the world today where men calling out these injustices is needed because the shitty people don't respect women enough to hear them out. Hopefully one day soon, a woman would just be able to kick someone out, like Tej, on their own. But until then, we as a society have reached a point that I think it is men's responsibility to support that in any way possible. At the end, despite his flaws, the Lear comes out as a deeply caring father and person. One thing that was a little funny about this was when I watched it. I put this on the list and watched it just days before the New York mayoral race. The director of this, Pina, is Zoran Mondami's mom, and I didn't know that until after. Funny coincidence, I watched this when I did. I could probably keep talking about this movie and all the little parts of it. I loved it. The entire ensemble cast killed their roles, but specifically the Lear and Rhea, but there's no dead weight. I could talk about how good the colors are and how they change with the emotions, mirrored Lear's direction, but I don't need to. I've said enough about how much I love this story and will probably keep talking about it to people forever. I really love this one, guys. Go watch this one. It feels like they got a little lazy towards the end of this, just throwing genres at you for the categories, with this one being dark comedy. I went with Pink Flamingo. I did watch this one the day after Happiness, and low-key, I think that movie prepared me for what was coming in this one. Divine is a criminal who is on the run, living with her mother who is a baby, son who is a weirdo, and his girlfriend. She is dubbed the world's filthiest person. Her rivals, Connie and Raymond Marble, who run a baby-selling ring where they kidnap women, try to take that title of filthiness from her. They send Divine a box full of shit, and Divine decides they need to die. Their feud goes back and forth, including Divine giving her son head. This is a fucked up movie, guys. But Divine kidnaps the Marbles and kills them in front of a news team. Then, to end it off, she eats dog shit for some reason. I had my fun in the last entry, enough talking about one of the greatest movies ever. Let me go back to a movie I failed to understand or see eye to eye with in any way. Before this, my relationship with John Waters was just a singular Instagram reel where he talks about how his movie tastes are better than everyone else's, and it feels good to know better. Unfathomably based take. I felt it in my bones, and it has stuck with me for years at this point. That being said, my taste is better than his, and this movie is bad. The movie goes to filth a little bit too much and too often for my liking without much payoff. I didn't even say all the gross shit they do in this movie, I spared you some of the details. I need a reason other than because for some of this to get fully on board, and I just never got anything out of it that gave me a reason to go to the lengths it did. It's the same problem I had all the way back with Happiness. The movie seems to be reveling in the gross shit it does, but I don't see that as fun or entertaining, which John Waters probably loves. I'm the type of loser he was actively trying to gross out with this, so I imagine he likes this review, and the idea that I don't get his movie makes him happy. It was fine enough and managed not to be complete bottom of the barrel stuff, the high point being Divine and her delivery on a lot of these lines. The end, when she had the court session for the marbles, her craziness was pretty fun. When the movie wasn't too occupied with being weird and gross, it got somewhat funny. Now this is more like it, a proper category. Another adventure in moviegoing, this time with Rachel Kushner, an author. I'm actually quite interested in seeing what she has to say about these movies and how it would differ from a more typical film person, and I chose to watch Wanda. Look, let me level with you real quick. If you're this far in the video, I can be a bit honest. I do not care about Wanda in any capacity at all, and the idea of forcing out some kind of review is dumb, so I'll keep this short. The movie was fine. The strongest moments are when it questions how far you personally would be willing to go to help someone in a bad situation, even if they are not making correct decisions. Wanda is mentally ill and in a rough spot. She keeps making things worse for herself, but that doesn't make her unworthy of help, and that is kind of what the movie is all about, which I do enjoy to some extent. But the movie was too boring for me to fully invest in that question, not offering up much. I hate saying it, but that's just how I felt on Wanda. The final continent we have is Australia. I chose to watch The Last Wave, a movie that features a story heavily focused on the Aboriginal people of Australia, because that sounded fun to me. David Burton is a corporate tax lawyer. After a night of heavy rain, 4 Australian Aboriginal people are accused of murder, and David is put on their case. He starts getting dreams of heavy rain and other vague apocalyptic events, being visited by Chris Lee, one of the accused in his dreams. Part of his defense involves meeting and learning more about the Aboriginal people, learning about Dreamtime, a belief that dreams are visions from the future. David keeps going deeper, trying to find his connection to this upcoming apocalypse. The movie ends with David accepting the floods are here to wipe everyone out, as a form of karma for the European settlers moving into Australia, although we don't know if this was just a dream or actual reality. If you knew my film taste, you would probably predict that I did not enjoy my time with Last Wave. I normally vehemently oppose this dreamlike, vague storytelling. We have no clue what is happening and none of it makes any sense. The Lynchian style of filmmaking that The Last Wave took on. But I didn't have that big of a problem with it in this one. I think that comes down to how confused David, the main character, was. He had the same shocked intrigue I did, willing to just be confused. I never felt like the movie was trying too hard to confuse you, then look down on you for not understanding it. They knew this shit didn't make any sense. It also gives an explanation to some extent, that being the Aboriginal beliefs of Dreamtime. Taking this real life philosophy and making in-universe lore makes me more willing to give the idea some time and credence. When the movie is based around real philosophies with cultural importance that have been studied and practiced, I don't write it off the same way I would with some random shit a scriptwriter just made up for that one movie. I am far more interested in exploring other cultures, which just helps the movie. I'm not qualified to unpack the social commentary of white settlers and their friction with the Aboriginal people, but I appreciate that they consulted heavily with these people and had them on set to make sure that they were portraying the culture well. It was not just an exploration of white guilt, but generally seeking to understand a different culture and people. I went to the director's Letterboxd page. This is the dude who did The Truman Show and Dead Poets Society. Wild. I knew him as some bigger director, with acclaim behind him, and didn't realize his background was as an indie director in Australia. A fun connection to be made about everyone having to start somewhere. Lastly, I love just how wet this movie is. When you put water in your title, I expect water. And Wave delivered. This movie dripped. There were so many floods. Category 49 was to watch a movie directed by a woman. Ew, gross, am I right? I don't want to watch movies by women. Putting this category so far back does make it feel like an afterthought, but I like the idea of it anyway. I went with Working Girls, directed by Lizzie Borden. Molly works in a brothel. The movie follows her day at the job. The boss, Lucy, uses the girls and only pretends to care about them, bending the rules for certain clients she likes. Molly's girlfriend does not know she's a prostitute and it weighs on her. Clients keep trying to push Molly to meet up outside the brothel, which she's of course uncomfortable with, and Lucy does nothing about it. Molly ends up quitting at the end of the day. I enjoyed my time with Working Girls. It is a rather low-budget, simple movie, but I don't care. It is exactly what it needs to. They made the most out of their limited sets and inexperienced actors, most of it being in one room, with some of the actors still having only Working Girls as their Credits. Which was felt a little bit, but it didn't matter because of the cast's chemistry with each other. They bounced off each other well and it all felt genuine, which is what a smaller, contained, character-driven movie like this needs. The screenplay here is the strongest part, focusing on a day in the life of a sex worker, the challenges she faced, and how that shows you the problems that many women face. Lizzie Borden is solid in her role as director. She makes the mistake a couple others up until this point have of trying a little too hard, so in the grand scheme of things, she did great. Trying too hard being your biggest problem means you're doing a good job. I think the standout part of this is how well they handled the sex and nudity in the movie. The scenes of the women with clients were not erotic in the slightest. Since it came from a woman, the movie avoided the male gaze. In fact, not only is the movie not sexy, it was uncomfortable. It did a great job relaying how hard being a sex worker can be. The power dynamic of being super vulnerable and having to protect yourself without losing a customer is a balance that is hard, and we see that happen on screen. Molly sticks up for herself, telling the men their interaction ends at the brothel, and she gets called a whore, being demonized for making money through sex by the men who are paying for it. I feel like a lot of directors, especially male ones, would have made the sex scenes a lot more appealing. Look at Nora, a movie I do love and think tackles sex work pretty well. The sex scenes are meant to be an attraction to the movie. Honora is not just performing for the men in the movie, but for the audience outside of it. Working Girls avoids that entirely. Who knew the best way to make a movie about women was to have a woman direct and write it? Hard idea that one is. I liked this movie. One final closet picks category, this time from Ben Wheatley, the guy who directed The Meg 2. Sure, why not? I went with the documentary Crumb. For some reason, I chose to write a review about a documentary for the second time. Crumb follows cartoonist Robert Crumb and just kind of vibes around him. He has a depressing outlook in life and hates the world. His works are mostly satirical small print comics, usually dealing with women and how he finds them attractive. They get everyone for this. Dude's ex-girlfriends, work colleagues, his brothers who are just as fucked up as him. He moves to France and abandons his son for a second time. As another doc, this is a little hard to review, but it was a fine time. Robert is an interesting enough guy to sustain the movie, but not interesting enough to make me recommend the movie to others. He just kinda sucks, but not even in a fun way. Just a sexual weirdo who excuses his weirdness as being social norms are wrong. He bucks any responsibility down the line. He is fucked up because he had a deadbeat dad, but then he abandons his son at a young age, and then again when he moves to France. I think docs like this just miss something for me. Sure, it shows the ego of a person, but it doesn't actually dive into how that affects people, nor if there is any change. You don't get a character arc in docs like this, leaving me with nothing real. Except there was one shot of a random dude feeding a rat pizza. That was very real and I enjoyed it. My favorite part of this movie was during one of the interviews, this guy was being really complimentary of Crumb and his work, heaping praise at the satire and layers involved in Crumb's illustrations and writing. He really went to bat for Crumb. Then the interviewer reveals that Crumb jerks off to his own drawings and it isn't satire, he finds them hot. The pure disgust and disappointment on that man's face. He was so sad and grossed out. It is a contender for top 5 funniest moments in any of these movies, just how real it was. I don't think much of this movie will stick with me. The longer time goes on, the fuzzier memories will be. The second to last movie, the second to last category. It was to watch a movie from a director you have never seen a film from. I went back to my failed attempt from last year and picked out one of the more interesting looking movies from director Jeffrey Lau, The Eagle Shooting Heroes. It's about a princess's quest to find a magical book that will help her rule. She puts together a ragtag group who all kinda hate each other. The book is in a cave guarded by 3 monsters. The longer she goes on her quest, the more people who hear about it and try to help or take it for themselves. A really evil dude gets the book and everyone needs to come together to stop him. Plot threads come and go with relative little friction. They will be following one character, then put that on the back burner and introduce a new thing, but they all tie it together with the final battle. Alright everybody, we have some absolute fire for these last 2 movies, some of the best yet, that I'm excited to talk about. For context, the first line of my Letterboxd review for this one was, "I love movies, the passion is back, feeling restored." This was not supposed to be a movie I loved and look back on this fondly. The movie's production was spearheaded by Wong Kar-wai, the guy who did the ultra-serious love story and In the Mood for Love. He was making Ashes of Time. The budget kept ballooning and it took longer to make, so he came up with a plan, using some of the Ashes of Time budget to make a movie quickly and release it during a Chinese New Year. Make it fun and people will come watch. Get that New Year's check that comes every year. So he took a lot of the cast from Ash of Time and got them to shoot this, having Jeffrey Lau, the producer for Ashes of Time, take on this project as director. So this movie was only made because everyone in it wanted to make a different so-called better movie. This was just a way to fund this serious art project. I have not watched Ashes of Time, but I think that there is no way it's better than this peak movie. I do know to some extent this movie is a satire, making fun of the goofiness of wuxia, the historical fantasy kung fu movies, like Heroic Trio that were coming out at this time, leaning further into slapstick than gritty action. But it is the very idea of being silly that makes this movie work. It knows this entire genre is at the very least silly, and it steers into that. They decided to max out that silly meter and have as much fun as they could. It comes across so well. The comedy was so good, throwing gags at you, both in the script and in the action. The three creatures in the cave, moving the pots back and forth, each side having the same idea and being tricked by it, constantly missing the tornado move, and it going to some wacky thing off on the side, conversations ending themselves with confusion. I was laughing out loud, full belly laughs for so much of this movie. The gags never let up, making some of the most gorgeous and handsome people on earth, like stunning people, do the stupidest shit ever is going to be funny. The fight choreo is also insane and impressive for this movie. So fast and smooth, everything landing just right and looking crisp. This isn't a so bad it's good movie. They knew how to block and shoot this to make the script as funny as it could be. They took the wire action of the time, cranked up the speed and produced something new, resulting in a movie that's energy is unmatched, boldly its own thing. This is how action should be, exciting and unique. I have a lot of takeaways from doing this challenge and documenting my experience and thoughts on these movies in this video, but my biggest takeaway is just how great Hong Kong cinema used to be. In the Mood for Love, Police Story, the Heroic Trio movies, and this all sit towards the top of the ranking. I found myself pulled into these movies and their style of filmmaking, even when they all differ so much. I have become a fan of this period, which feels a little weird. I've never been able to say that before, that I like certain periods of time and a play's cinematic output. I've already picked movies for the 2026 challenge, and Hong Kong definitely has spots on that list because I found myself enjoying the ones I watched for this. Sure, the eagle shooting heroes lost track of the plot a little bit, and it's the least serious movie ever. It didn't hit me emotionally deeply, but movies don't have to be that. There's not only one way to make a good movie. I gave this one 5 stars, which felt a little dramatic. Once I sat on it and questioned if Eagle Shooting Heroes was really 5 stars, of course it is. I need to allow myself to like dumb movies that don't take themselves seriously. One of the reasons I love Emperor's New Groove so much is that it serves as a reminder to have some fun in this hobby that so often can be a drag. So if I had a blast watching Eagle Shooting Heroes, why shouldn't it be a 5 star? I can imagine myself sitting down and talking with someone else who has seen this movie, and just wheezing as we bring up a bunch of different parts. I sit here smiling, thinking about the movie. That's what makes this as good as it is. And finally, category 52 is a film on your watch list in the collection. I don't have a long watch list with much in the collection and treated this as a wild card spot, so I could choose pretty much any movie I wanted. I went with Irma Vep, because it is about movies, it's a nice end cap to the video, and one final Maggie Cheung movie as well. Maggie plays herself, who was hired by French director Renee to play the role of Irma Vep, a sexy thief in this remake of an old classic movie. The set is a volatile place, with Renee being rather unwell and prone to outbursts, but Maggie's there to do her job. She goes to have dinner with some of the crew, and one of the girls confesses she has feelings for Maggie, which makes things a little awkward. Renee has a complete breakdown, calling Maggie in the middle of the night and having to step back from the project. A new director comes in and refuses to work with Maggie because he thinks Irma should be played by a French actress. She leaves and the crew watches an edit done by Renee that is flat out insane. I don't know if I will ever fully tire of movies about movies. Nobody makes fun of their own industry quite like filmmakers. Here it isn't cringe, it doesn't come off as self-indulgent. It is deliberate and confident. Through Maggie's eyes, we see a world that is the production of this movie, and all the insanity that happens, all the ego. The movie criticizes the state of constant remakes and cash grab. At one point they diss Police Story, because filmmakers are too good for certain types of movies. The movie shows the over-sexualization of women and criticizes the moviegoers for enjoying it. Beauty sells, of course it does, but Irma Vep touches on just how far that goes, and how talking about a person's beauty can often undermine the human behind those look and their actual skill. A point I think is often overlooked. When people talk about this movie, a lot of the time they just go to the fact that Maggie Cheung in a latex suit is stunning, which I'm not disagreeing with. But if it isn't the first 5 things you have to say about this movie, you're the problem. She does so much more in this than look stunning. Of course, she's one of the most attractive people ever. I will talk more about her in a minute, go into what I think she's doing here in detail. I don't want to add to the point that I'm just sexualizing her, but I have to finish the point I'm on. This movie is looking at its audience and pointing out the behavior that audience engages in. It is also about why people create art, the two main ideas being for personal artistic satisfaction, then for the legacy and how others react. At first glance, I would say go for the personal feeling, but this movie pushes back on that. Renee, the director, is only making this because he wanted to see Maggie in the role, and then pushes too much, trying to have control over the entire movie. Renee seeking for satisfaction is selfish and harmful when it presents itself in this way, using and hurting people for his gain. It sounds so wrong, but maybe filmmakers should sacrifice some personal desires and control for the sake of a better movie and for the others who are working on that project. That is a thought I never would agree with in most film discussions. I talk about giving directors more freedom and control all the time, but there's an opposite side to every coin. But also, while Renee does suck in universe, he is, unfortunately, very based. This guy watched the heroic trio and knew he just had to make a movie with Maggie. After watching that, he thought she was perfect for this role, and I agree. After watching the heroic trio, I also thought she was the best actress ever. All this criticism comes from a place of love. The people who made Irma Vep love this messy world that is filmmaking and choose to keep pursuing it. They agree filmmaking is great, but can't sit by and pretend everything is as good as possible. You have to criticize the world you live in. Now to talk about Maggie Cheung, who is the main character of this video, honestly. She was in the first movie, 4 more along the way. In this final one, you will see soon that a lot of these movies clog up the top of the ranking. An actress I knew about, but had seen nothing else of, now has such an effect on me and a grab. It might just be time to call Maggie Cheung the greatest of all time for me. This has been her defining role of the video. Police Story was fun, Heroic Trio was awesome, and she did do great in A Move for Love, but this is some proper once-in-a-lifetime acting right here. Playing herself, she was ostracized and gawked at every turn. She was so often infantilized, sexualized, and treated less than, but this is what happens to women and Asian people, all minorities really, in all culture and in the movie industry. Compartmentalizes it and has to come up with something to react to. The small moments of her being unable to form a reasonable reaction are perfect. She's bewildered at what is happening around her and what people say. Then she just has to find the answer to an uncomfortable question. The balance here is everything, giving subtle signs of discomfort, forced to take it because if she gets angry, she's gonna be kicked off the project. Maggie is undeniable. Her presence and ability to display emotion is unmatched. I legitimately cannot think of a single other actor who can convey this much in a simple smile, then dropping that smile. She never overplays it, which would have been so easy for a lonely fish out of water. Maggie is the heart and soul of this movie. I have said I'm interested in following other people's movies before, diving deeper, but I mean it with this one. After I finish this video, I will be spending a lot of time watching Maggie's movies, and I can't wait. She is simply that good. I have one big, massive complaint about this movie. Jean-Pierre Laud as Renee. This dude had such a thick French accent, yet kept speaking English. Like at points, it was not understandable what he was saying. I think if he wasn't able to properly speak English, you just have him speak French. If it was a character choice to make him seem more French, make him speak French. Nobody out there is going to turn your movie off because you have subtitled another couple dozen lines. It was a serious distraction throughout this, but it doesn't matter. Because of everything I have mentioned, and also the ending of this movie being magical. Such a scattered brain edit, rough and messy. Not a cohesive movie, but a hallucination of what could have been. Visually and audibly a feast, so much to experience, and the perfect cap to this movie. The feeling I got, the feeling this pulled out of me, were everything. Ending a relatively calm movie with such a hectic shot of adrenaline, after giving us the calm ending with Maggie, shows the world she was in, and the people she was around. Makes it feel a little better that she didn't end up finishing. It was okay anyway, she got to go have her happy time. I love Maggie Cheung, and movies, this is about those two things. This one's so good, and man, I love movies. So there was my 2025 Criterion Challenge. I'm so happy I went through and completed it. Glad that mid-March I realized I could do it and then I actually finished it. It helped me explore more movies, find stuff I love, and get a sense for what I want to keep looking into. At the start of the year, I'm going to be making a list of my 50 favorite movies ever, and a number of these will be in contention for that list and probably pretty high up. Making the video gave me something to work on for most of the year. The script has been coming together for months now, like since March really. It is a little overwhelming to have been working on a video this long, running in the background, but I am damn proud of this one. I think I had some really good film discussion, able to talk about why I like or didn't like movies, and some film analysis in here. I've already made my list for the the 2026 Criterion Challenge, which I hopefully remember to link. I am unsure if I will make another video next year. If you're still watching, you have to subscribe. There's no other option. If you were willing to watch me yap about these 52 random movies, I assume you enjoyed it. I'm already so thankful you made it here. But my last request would be like, comment, and share. I'm ending this off with a ranking of how much I enjoyed these 52 movies. This list was hard to make. So many of these are just solid movies. Then the top 5 or so were impossible to choose in order for. But I have to. So here it goes. Ranking every movie I watched as part of the 2025 Criterion Challenge from worst to best. 52, The Shrouds. 51, Heart of a Dog. 50, The Passion of Joan of Arc. 49, Woman Under the Influence. 48, Happiness. 47, King Lear. 46, Life of Brian. 45, Persona. 44, Dressed to Kill. 43, Punch Drunk Love. 42, Pink Flamingos. 41, Theif. 40, Pina. 39, Old Joy. 38, Crumb. 37, Armegeddon. 36, Wanda. 35, The Most Dangerous Game. 34, My Dinner with Andre. 33, The Last Wave. 32, Takeout. 31, Gilda. 30, The Killing of a Chinese Bookie. 29, Uncut Gems. 28, 8.5. 27, The Circus. 26, To Sleep with Anger. 25, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. 24, Touki Bouki. 23, Only Angels Have Wings. 22, Working Girls. 21, The Heroic Trio's Executioners. 20, Real Life. 19, Valley of the Dolls. 18, Mothra Vs Godzilla. 17, Coffee and Cigarettes. 16, The Player. 15, Rashamon. 14, Brute Force. 13, Yojimbo. 12, Hoop Dreams. 11, Worst Person in the World. 10, Police Story. 9, Pixote. 8, Bitter Rice. 7, In the Mood for Love. 6, Eagle Shooting Heroes. 5, Anatomy of a Murder. 4, Irma Vep. 3, Monsoon Wedding. 2, The Young Girls of Rochefort. 1, The Heroic Trio. Thanks for watching.